the Lexington Affordable Housing Trust in the town of Lexington, Massachusetts to order. Please note that the Lexington Affordable Housing Trust meeting is being conducted in person. We are also going to be recording the meeting today, both by Zoom as well as LexMedia, who will be posting the recording online in the next several days. So first of all, I want to introduce the trustees who are here. First of all, we're starting with Tiffany Payne. Here. Mark Sandine.
Here. I think it's here.
Are you here, Mark? Bill Erickson.
Yes.
I'm Elaine Tung and Linda Prosnitz. And we also have Carol Kowalski, who is Assistant Town Manager of Development. Here. As well as we have another town staff here, Ragi Ramachandran, who keeps us all going. She's administrative staff in the Land Use and Housing Department. So first of all, what I'd like to talk about with the trustees is the questions that we had talked about that we're going to be asking today. Bill had brought up that for the third interviewee, we should perhaps not discuss, bring up the question regarding elevators. Does anybody have any thought on that? So I'm in agreement with Bill that it didn't make much sense, but if that's okay with everybody, then we will remove that question. Tiffany, are you okay with that? Mark? Bill?
Yes.
Yeah.
Linda? Okay, we're going to remove that last question. The other thing is I did send out site visit schedule, and I'm still waiting for some people to reply, but we really need to let the developers know when we might want to visit, starting as soon as tomorrow. So if people can please fill that out. And then I will also send it around to the proposal review working group, if any of them want to join. Okay, so anything else anybody else wants to bring up? Hearing nothing, if we're going to start a little bit early because we're on a condensed time frame. So first off, we have Affirmative Investments who have been so kind to join us. And sorry, hold on one second. Too many pieces of paper. I want to thank everybody, first of all, members of the public, as well as Affirmative Investments, for attending today's highly anticipated meeting. The purpose of this meeting is for the Affordable Housing Trust to conduct interviews only and for the Affordable Housing Trust to ask questions. There will be no public comment or questions, but please feel free, if you're in the public, to email any comments you may have afterwards to the Affordable Housing Trust at affordablehousingtrust@lexingtonma.gov, and we will take them into consideration as we make our recommendation to the Select Board. First of all, for Affirmative Investments, if you could introduce yourselves and let us know how you would like to be addressed. And could you also introduce and talk about your partners in this development? After that, we will start with your presentation, and then we'll have approximately 30 minutes for questions from the Affordable Housing Trust. We have at least 8 questions that we'll be asking you, so please be mindful of the time and plan your responses accordingly. In addition, since we are recording this, if you wouldn't mind, I will be giving you afterwards an email address for LexMedia so they can post it. It will be a much better, just your presentation only, it'll be much better quality if you wouldn't mind doing that. All right, so who wants to get started?
I can start. So you mind if I stand? So I'm Tara Mizrahi. I am principal at Affirmative Investments. I will introduce my team if that's okay. Okay. So we have 4 people from Affirmative Investments here today. President David Ennis, Senior Vice President of Real Estate Craig Nicholson, and our Associate Project Manager Virginia Coffey. And then we have our architecture team, PCA Architects. We have Betsy Cook and Laura Holmich. And we may have joining Wingate Management or property managers. They may. Do you want me to start from here?
Sure. And how would you like to be addressed?
I'm she.
She.
Anybody else? Go ahead.
Well, I was sort of thinking, like, do you want your first name? Or...
In this day and age,
Right.
Yeah, first names are fine.
Okay, great. Thank you.
never know.
You never know. So great. Thank you for having us here. I'm so excited to be here, first as a Lexington resident, and second as an affirmative, because I'm really excited that the trust has gotten us this far and that this site is going to be developed no matter what. Of course, I think that we're a great match for it, but first, I'm really excited. So I do live in Lexington. I travel on Lowell Street every day, and I'm very committed to affordable housing in the town. Some of you probably know me. I'm a board member on LexHab, which is now a separate nonprofit from the town that owns and operates affordable housing throughout the town. So we introduced the team members that are here, and I'm just gonna kind of bring up, we have a lot of team members. Okay, Gene, come on in. I just need a seat over there. And then Gene's gonna be here for questions from Wingate Management. So here are our partners up here. Really just wanted to show you who else is on the team. All of them are well qualified. A lot of them have experience in Lexington with affordable housing, and we also have a significant number of MBEWBs. An affirmative, I don't know if I mentioned it, is a women-owned company. So next. The town has gotten amazing responses for this, which is great, and a lot has to do with the trust doing a really great job with the RFP. So you have a lot of qualified people. We feel like we're uniquely able to do this project because many of our projects are actually partnerships with community nonprofits or housing trusts. And so these are just 4 examples. The upper left was with the Belmont Housing Trust. The bottom left was with the Manchester Affordable Housing Corporation in Manchester by the Sea. And then the 2 on the right are in construction now on the Vineyard with the Island Housing Trust. Some of the other things that we think are unique about us, as I said, we're a women-owned firm. Most of our projects are actually in the 40 to 50 unit range that we develop. Most of our projects use the comprehensive permit as our permitting with town support, not anti-40B projects. Sustainability is really important to us. We use Passive House guidelines now for all of our projects. Passive House, for those who don't know, is kind of a metric for energy efficiency and low carbon footprint. It's a fairly new metric, and so we're proud to say that actually we're already certified on one of our projects. 2 will be certified by the end of this year. Talked about sustainability, and then lastly, I think that we have a right-sized, in our mind, we have a right-sized development firm that we're really proud of how we work. Senior staff and principals are involved all the way through the project from the beginning to the end. But we also have a really strong supportive staff that kind of gives multiple perspectives, allows us to be really quick in our responsiveness to people, and have a supportive, growing environment for our staff. And the last thing I'm going to talk about is just back to diversity. As we mentioned on our soft side, we have diversity, but we thought we'd just give an example of 2 very recent projects where we set out goals for MWBE and person of color participation in workforce, and you can see our goals and that we've exceeded them on our last 2 recent projects, and we hope to do the same at the project here. So I'm now going to turn it over to Laura Homich, who's going to talk about our design.
Hi, my name is Laura Homich. I'm a principal at PCA, and we've been doing affordable housing. We've been working with Affirmative Investments on a handful of projects. I really enjoy working with them, and similarly have a collaborative approach. Really like to work with our clients, our consultants, and the stakeholders throughout towns through all of our projects. So this is just an idea. This is a concept that we came up with sort of in a vacuum. We haven't had a lot of conversations with you, just the RFP to get information. But the site itself, as we were looking at it, it was pretty clear that there were some goals and things that we would want to carry through, even if the design was to change and shift. Firstly, we wanted to create an inclusive and affordable and accessible, fully accessible projects. We do have elevators. I'm not sure if the question is just redundant or not, and that's probably why you're taking it out. So, we wanted to have an environment like that, create an environment like that. We really focused on public realm within our firm and creating that sense of place. So that was super important to us, and that just creates community, and with folks who live in these communities, that's a very important thing to them because it is their home. We looked at the site, and we wanted to take advantage of all that the site had to provide. At the bottom here, I like to stand and point, so I don't know if that'll come across well, but at the bottom here, we have a wetland, or woodland rather, with some topography, so we saw that as an opportunity to nestle our project, or your project really, into the hillside and down and create that, take advantage of that buffer. We saw, it's hard for me to point that far, but there it says exit signage, there is an existing stone wall. We saw that as an opportunity to create a gateway into the project itself. The preserved wetland at the back, I don't know about you, but if I was a kid, that is 100% where I'd be playing day to day. And so put our, patio and open spaces there. And then, felt that there was a way to create a connectivity through the entire site, and have also taken a look at potential for sidewalk improvements on Lowell Street itself. Because we did notice that down the street in a couple of other places there have been those instances, and don't know if the future plan is to interconnect all of that. But, suggesting that we could do our part and connect. And not only that, Market Basket's right up the street, that's where I shop. So giving access to those spaces and just, leaning into what the site has to offer. And then another goal that we had was, like I said, just creating that connectivity to the natural environment and to Lowell Street and the community at large. And last but not least, having an aesthetic that really does, if you don't mind going to the next slide, having an aesthetic that fits in, to the context of the neighborhood and Lexington itself. Really just sliding ourselves right in there and creating a vibrant community. So those are sort of our overarching goals as we approach the project as a whole. But again, this is just an idea. And so with that, we have 42 units of 1, 2, and 3 bedrooms. Each
47.
I'm sorry. Did I say that? 47. I even have that on my notes. I just said it. Sorry about that. We have 47. The building is 2 and 3 stories tall. So at the very front, we saw that there was a little bit of a step down, trying to sort of, bring people in incrementally. And both buildings are fully accessible with elevators, fully visitable throughout. We have, correct me if I'm wrong, 52, is that right, parking spots?
Correct.
With the intent of having one-to-one with some visitor overflow. And, we do live in a snowy area. Sometimes you need that snow storage. So that's where those extra parking spots would be used for. And then beyond that, we have ground floor amenities. These are just some suggestions. This is sort of, a first take on, what would be most useful. But we find that things like, not on here, the work pods, community rooms, some little small kitchen spaces for events and get-togethers and gatherings, mail and package space is really important in these projects these days. And then our indoor-outdoor amenities carry over towards the wetland or into the wooded area with patios, a play structure. We have bike storage as well back there. So these are just some of the suggestions that we, put forth into the project. And these are some images of our work, of what we've done, just showing off, what those spaces could be like. But I think one of the highlights of the project really is that plaza, that patio space that we put in between the two projects, because what we've done is try to create, while there are different buildings and separate buildings, have that space in the middle where people will naturally leave their homes, come in and out, see each other, get to know each other and meet each other, and create that sense of community. So with that, I think I'll hand it back to Craig.
You may.
for further. Oh, and this is just an example unit designed to HLC standards. This is an example 2-bed, and a nice little kitchen space. So it's an example of our work.
Hi, I'm Craig Nicholson, Senior VP of Real Estate with Affirmative. In our response, we listed out kind of the relief that we would be looking for in a 40B process. The first one and the third one, multifamily housing, multiple buildings, multiple homes on a lot, that's just because it doesn't exist in the current zoning, and as per your RFP, that's what you're looking for, so those are kind of the obvious two. The second one is height. We currently have a design that goes to 45 feet. It is possible for us to change the pitch of the roof to get to 40 feet. However, because we have elevators and we have all of the units being visitable and adaptable or just full accessible, we do need that full third floor versus a second and 2.5 floors. So we would need relief on that ordinance regardless of the roof pitch. We do just think the roof pitch looks better at a higher pitch. And then the last one is really more of a kind of saver for us. As affordable housing, there are certain logos that we have to put on signs, accessibility, fair housing, things like that. They have to be a certain size. Sometimes, depending on the size allowed by a sign, it can get kind of cramped. So we just usually ask for a little bit of relief there up front just to make sure that the sign looks right, looks nice, doesn't look crowded, and is able to fit in with the environment and the neighborhood. Next slide. When it's affordable housing, a lot of people will ask, who are you actually serving? And in our model, we have income tiers going from below 30%. Most of them, and the average of the entire development, will be at or below 60% of area median income. And then we have some that are below 80% of the area median income. And we like this model because it provides some economic diversity within the building. So you have not just fully focused on the very low income or fully focused on the more moderate income, but you get a wide spread and everybody gets to interact with all levels of economic diversity. But in terms of who it really serves, if you look at the 2-bedroom, 60% AMI income at $88,000, that's essentially 2 3-year tenured Lexington public school teachers and 1 kid living in a 2-bedroom apartment. So that's the type of people it serves. If you go to the 80% level, that's a police officer and a teacher and their 1 kid living in a 2-bedroom apartment. So it's really housing designed for hardworking individuals and families, and really focusing on the people that are supporting your community and living and should be living in your community as they support your community. And the next slide. On the financing side, this is a model built on the 47 units that we have designed. A model would work at something less than 47 units. It can't go too low, otherwise you start losing some benefits, but there is some wiggle room on the 47 units. But it's a model that we do all the time. Multiple state funds, federal LIHTC, state LIHTC, EOHLC, MassWorks to do that sidewalk up to the corner. We do this all the time where we cobble together those different funding stacks and funding sources. And then we have some money from the Lexington Affordable Housing Trust, which is not only the low cost for the land, which you see on the uses side, but having a financial commitment of the town really makes an application into EOHLC much more competitive. So we like to see that as well. And then we generally defer some of our fee to be paid later on in the process, just to all be a part of the process of getting this done. On the uses side, again, it's the 47 units. Hard costs are the biggest thing. We are basing this on buildings that we're doing now, plus some escalators, because we're not going to be under construction now. We're going to be in construction 2 years from now based on the timing. So we have to escalate those costs as a key to make sure that we're able to build it for capital that we're trying to raise now. This is also 2 buildings with elevators. So we have elevators in both buildings, which are expensive. We also are doing passive house, so that's a bit of a premium as well. So that's where we start getting those high construction costs on a per unit basis. And then the rest just kind of fall in place after that. Architecture fees, construction interest, that's a big one in these days and these rates. And then lastly, we have a very healthy contingency to make sure that we don't have to come back and start asking people for more money just because we didn't plan appropriately. And the next slide, community involvement. This is really important to us. These are not done in a vacuum, especially in partnership with an Affordable Housing Trust. As Laura had mentioned, what we've shown is us in a vacuum thinking about it. That's not how we typically do it. We usually do kind of a 3-step community involvement process where we go out and we have an initial meeting with the community. And by community, it's the broad community, not just the abutters, but we'll work with the town to find out underrepresented groups to make sure that their voices are heard. But we do an initial meeting. It's more of a listening session. What do you want? What does the town need? What do you need as abutters to make sure that this is a win for everybody? And then we bring that back and we have it influence the design and what we're going to offer and what we're going to present. And then we show it again. And we get that feedback. We take it back one more time. And then we do what we like to do as an open house. And in that scenario, it's more like, it's like a science fair. You know, we have the whole project and we have the team and we have the architect and we have the traffic consultant and we have the landscape and we have the sustainability person. And so as the people come in from the town, they get to ask based on what their key real personal interest is. If it's traffic, then they're going to go and talk to the traffic consultant the whole time. If it's, you know, landscaping and using native plants, they'll focus on the landscape architect. But we have all of them there so they really get a holistic view and are able to focus in on their questions. And that's really the process that we go through. And with that, I would say thank you, and we're happy to answer questions.
And there are plenty of seats over here on the card that we're moving wants to sit.
Well, first of all, thank you for keeping to the time frame allotted. That was great. What we're going to do is we're going to ask questions. I'll start first, and then it'll go from Tiffany and right down the board. So I know you've already answered part of this question already, but our first question was, please elaborate on your team's success in community engagement, plans for this project, and what have you learned from community engagements that didn't go as planned, if any?
I'm sure we can all come up with examples. I'm starting at the end thinking, so I mean, it's communication, right? I think if that is critical. So open lines of communication, so all through the process. So I think that, and being very clear, like Craig laid out, like what is the process going to be? It's always helpful when people understand the different points at which they're going to be able to give input, and like when is it too late, and because that's always a concern, right? So I think that we've probably learned from experience that it is helpful to be very clear about kind of what those timeframes might be, and then so people's anxieties aren't kind of, you know, coming to the front, and that we can kind of really work through issues. Craig, do you have other stuff?
Yeah, and I've neglected to mention it, but you know, through that it's always better to communicate more and across multiple ways. So we will have and request emails from people at community meetings so we can push out information. We will be looking at having an informational website where people can go and see what the things are, and we'll have the schedule posted so that people know when the next meetings are. But as far as an experience of doing this and having that sort of feedback, 2 of the projects that Tara mentioned at the beginning are over on Martha's Vineyard, and you know, the towns have been very supportive. Not all the neighbors were necessarily supportive of it. They're big projects for the vineyard. One is 40 units, one is larger than that, but it is that ongoing interaction and conversation with the neighbors that is the key to getting it through the process.
And I would say the process even through construction. So I think it's really important before construction starts to have a pre-construction meeting, invite neighbors in the community, be very clear about if there's issues during construction, who do people call. So it doesn't end once it's like permitted and then it goes on. Sorry to interrupt.
No, that's true. And that's the thing is it's communicate 3 ways. You know, as many ways as you can find to communicate the information, then you communicate the information.
And I'll add, you know, listening is also very important. We often ask like why. We want to have a good reason why something is that way. We find that that's a very good way to explain things. If people are having a hard time understanding the project, we'll take a deep dive. We'll hear their problems, we'll hear what they're saying, and try to help them understand why something is a certain way. And if it doesn't need to be that way, we'll work with it. We'll try and find another solution. But I think listening is also a key aspect when working with communities and understanding what their challenges are.
Great. Any follow-up questions? Otherwise, we'll move on to the next. Okay, Tiffany?
Okay. The RFP sets forth a preference for approximately 40 units. Why did you choose the number of units you're proposing?
So I'll answer that. So as I said, I'm from Lexington. I really support affordable housing. And when we first looked at it, we kind of thought, mid 40s, let's see where we can go. And then once we situated the buildings, fitting 47 looked like it fit fine. It doesn't mean we need to do 47, but I think to show that actually this fits, right? I think we can come down from 47 by not, and I think that it means that we can be responsive of where the pushbacks are, right? What are the desires that we haven't met yet? What are maybe desires in the community of kind of, this is okay, but it's not okay over here, and we can tweak it. But the main thing was, I think once we laid it out, it was like 47 can fit, and it looks beautiful, and it makes a community. But that's why I kind of pushed them, because this is a great opportunity for the town of Lexington, and if it fits and it looks nice, then I felt like we should push that a little bit.
Could I add to that? So the other thing is that 47 is sort of a sweet spot in terms of the financing at the state level. And from an operational standpoint, it's cheaper or more efficient to operate with more units. So it's kind of a sweet spot. But as Tara said, we're flexible.
Yeah, I will also add that, the opportunity cost of not doing those extra units now is really a thing as well. If this site were 40 units, which again, if that's what the community wants, then great. But finding another location, doing another process for just 7 units is going to be very expensive on a per unit basis. It's a whole new permitting process. It's a whole new divestment of land process. It's a whole new application process through the funding cycles. So there really is a, dollar cost averaging of per unit costs by just adding a few more units now.
Yeah. So Jean is our manager, property manager. Maybe could you speak to 47 versus 40 or 36?
From a property management standpoint, we have a property that's nearby in Belmont, and it makes sense from standpoint of staffing to have 2 full-time people running both. So we have a property manager spending her time here as well as in Belmont, and hire a full-time assistant property manager to be at whatever property manager isn't. And that sizing will allow us to be able to afford to have 2 full-time people the site. So the site is going to be covered 40 hours a week.
Could I ask people to speak up?
Oh, sure. Follow-up questions. I actually had one question. I thought, Craig, you had said you couldn't, and maybe I misheard you. I thought you said that you couldn't go much below 47 units given the elevators and the passive house and all that other stuff. Sorry. I thought Craig had said he couldn't go much below 47 units because of the elevators, the passive house requirements, etc. And I just wanted to follow up on that with Craig.
Yeah, it's 7 units to get down to 40 is not a concern. If someone said you need to be at 20 units, yeah, that would be a concern. So when I think much, I'm like thinking you're slashing large portions of it off, not just several units, so to speak.
But it's playing around with, I think, amenities or sizes and how much money that might come from the trust. I mean, we can certainly make a 40-unit project work. It just depends kind of, funds and a bunch of pieces to it, but,
Mhm.
you know, we'll work with the town.
Okay, thank you. Next, Mark.
Sure. So I'm just kind of wondering, how many projects are you planning to do at this same time as this project? And can you talk a little bit about your bandwidth and timeline for moving forward?
So I think, you know, we're a little unique in that some projects we're doing full development tasks on, and some we might just be the financial consultants to groups. And so you might hear about us doing a lot of projects, but we may have a smaller role on some of the projects than others. I would say that while this is going on, we would have 2 that were still in construction, 2 that are in development phases as us as the developers, and then the rest of us as kind of consulting roles. Is that right? I'm thinking Colony here, the Vineyard ones.
The vineyard ones might,
might be
depending on
done.
when we
Yeah.
start construction,
That's
might be done with, or just, one will definitely be done, one will just be
Well,
finishing.
I'm just thinking you probably
Yeah.
care about the whole development process, not just construction.
Yeah,
So,
so-
yeah,
Colony will be under construction and second phase is being developed, so.
yeah. So I don't know if that's,
We have, I think the safe thing is we do have bandwidth. We wouldn't have responded if we didn't feel we could adequately address the needs of this project. And as Tara said, we're a right-sized firm where we have principals that will be involved in each project. Not every principal is involved in each project. And we have folks like Virginia down at the end that help support us to make sure that each project is moving along at the pace that gets it done as efficiently and quickly as possible.
one other piece, Mark, sorry. The other thing is, I'm here. I'm close. I'm very available. Our architect also is from Winchester. So in one sense, like there's very, you know, we're readily available as well to make things happen.
Yeah, our office is in Cambridge. It's not very
Yep.
far even.
At least for me, the intent of the question was to assess whether this would be a stretch or not. So if you can
No.
tell us a little bit about how this would fit with your sort of normal operating process.
So I think what's nice, we have 2 projects ending in our narrative we talked, we have 2 projects ending at the end of the year. So this actually fits very well. We have one in Brookline and one in Falmouth right now that will be completed by the end of the year, which allows a lot more work to happen. So if this were, we could happen very quickly.
Okay, anything else?
Thank you.
Bill?
So, I know there were comments made on the LDA, and everybody had comments on the LDA, but in the event, the rare event that, improbable event that the town could accept none of the, modifications that were proposed, how might that impact your project?
They can't hear you now.
Oh. Do you want me to redo it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. So, in terms of the comments that were regarding the land disposition agreement, the LDA, if the town ended up not accepting a single one of the modifications, how would that affect the project as you see it?
It probably depends on the lenders and investors. I mean, the financing people are the ones who are most concerned about what their rights are in the lease. So, and there's been more flexibility than I expected on certain deals we've done recently. But I don't think we can answer your question.
Just more specific, I think the biggest concern that we saw when we read it was about the investors and lenders who are putting a significant amount of money in. If the deal looks like it's going a little bit sideways or it's not going as well, they're going to want the right to step in first and kind of make it right. And that's probably what they're going to want to protect through this before the town comes in and replaces affirmative in it. It's a it's a LIHTC project. It's a complicated project. There's a lot of pieces, and I think that was the main concern I think that we thought they would have. It's not ours, but it's can we get this financed? Yeah.
Okay. Linda?
So my question is a little bit open-ended. You kept to choose the subject, And that is, what kind of challenges would you think you might see in this particular project? Any subject, whatever you might see as something particular.
I'll think of one and then you guys can go. So one is, it's a busy intersection. So I think it's gonna be really critical thinking about a construction management plan, how trucks come in, how they don't, when they can come, traffic. I think that we'll work with the traffic engineer both for a construction management plan and then obviously permanently where, how we're dealing with the in and out of the sites, but it's a little bit more just during construction, and everybody's tired and we're happy that Lowell Street is getting paved. But right, it's a sensitive road right there. So we really need to be mindful of that and careful during construction.
What about you from the design? Because I'm still thinking about
I
mine.
mean, similarly from the design standpoint, the where we have the entrance to the driveway is close to the intersection. Like, we recognize that. It was placed there because the topography was most level there and brings you in and around it's a pretty significant drop. I think it's as much as 12 feet at the highest end, down and into the site. And so, acknowledging that is a challenge. It's not the ideal location because of the proximity to the intersection. It is an intersection that gets used quite often. And it's how I go to Market Basket on a regular basis, so I know how busy it can be. So that is a challenge. Could we bring it up closer? I think we could look at things like that, like pulling it away from the intersection. The rest I don't see a lot of site challenges other than that. I think it's really the proximity of that driveway to the intersection. But with a civil engineer and a little more study, I think we could look at what can happen to drag it back.
I would just add to that we were looking at fire truck turnaround and being cognizant of that and accommodated it on the site plan. We recognize that it may be advantageous to add a second curb cut for that reason, but it would be navigating that topography that we're trying to maintain and use as a buffer. That was something we talked a lot about. in
Right.
design.
Do you guys have anything else?
Yeah.
Well, one thing, another challenge is the timing of accessing state funding. It's very backed up right now. I don't know if you've heard that. Mark's question, are we ready, do we have the bandwidth to go? We're ready to go tomorrow. We could start this. We actually, in terms of cycles, we're looking for new projects to submit. But the state at the moment isn't accepting new projects. This could change, and it will change. So,
Just to be clear, for 4% tax.
yeah, for 4%. Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's what
Yep.
that's what we feel makes sense for this project. So I'm not saying it is a problem, it could be a problem, timing.
From a time of, and we only do affordable housing. We do affordable housing, we do structured financing for economic development things. So we're very in tune with HLC, Mass Housing, Mass Development, which are the bond issuing agencies. So we're in touch with them all the time. We understand where they are in their backlog of projects and what their timing is. And yeah, the horizon that we gave you is absolutely doable, but it's something that can always come up. And that it's challenging now because there is such a backlog, and that could be one of those things.
I have a follow-up. Could your strategy change if sort of the 4% backlog continues?
Yes.
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 It's happening now, right? We have conversations, as Craig said, all the time with HLC and kind of throwing out different options. I'm sending another one today that was a 4% deal and kind of saying, here's an alternative, which they seem open to. So we can't promise what they're willing to do, but we're constantly reshuffling how to finance to keep the projects moving. And they're very supportive. They want these to keep moving as well.
We could use 9% credits with more soft money,
Right.
which is what Tara's project is doing.
Thank you.
Okay, next question. Does your pre-development funding give you flexibility to respond to changes?
Can you explain what more? Well, we're internally doing our pre-development financing, so we have flex. I don't know if that flexibility answers your question. Obviously, if the trust has some money and you're willing to give some of it ahead of time, we're happy to use. It's always good to use other people's money if it's available, But if it's not, we have our own funds, and we do this all the time, and we get paid back at closing for the pre-development fund. So there's no concern about us having enough funds to get us to a closing, if that's the question. Yep.
You know, we expect there'll be unanticipated things. We plan for it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So from my perspective, the question for me at least is flexibility. So you were saying that this is a concept and this can change and we can sort of move over here or move over this way. That impacts pre-development, right? So that's really what we're thinking about is how does your pre-development funding provide flexibility to deal with the kinds of things your architects are talking about?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So, the largest pre-development cost is the architecture.
Right.
And by going through our community process where we really start early and open up that listening session and getting those pieces out on the table first, we're not over designing before we go to the community and then they tell us we don't like that. So we're really trying to take that time to get the information from the community, bring it into a design so we're already kind of addressing their concerns first and then doing minor modifications to fine tune things and make everybody happy, as opposed to here's our design. And yeah, so we're not going to overspend early to make sure that we can adjust and have that flexibility.
Thank you.
Okay. Tiffany?
Does your pre-development funding,
It's number 7.
oh, sorry. Describe a project where you faced a particular challenge and how did you respond?
And, I'm sorry, what was the last part of it?
Like, what did you face a challenge in any of the developments or projects that you currently are doing or in the past?
Sure. Just pick one.
Every project has a challenge. Are you thinking design challenge? Are you thinking approval? Any challenge.
Here, with the water.
Oh, yeah, that's
the
good.
sewage.
So yeah, on one of our vineyard projects, there was not sewer capacity within the town, and the regional planning board, Martha's Vineyard Commission, is very aware of the nitrogen impact on the ponds and what that does to the ecosystem. So through that process, we had to find a way to do a septic system that doesn't produce as much nitrogen as required, or as a normal Title V regular septic system would, and find a way to mitigate the excess nitrogen that is being produced in order for the project to move forward. So multiple step process, kind of designing, working with new technology, working with agencies on the island to find a way to, what ultimately was the plan for mitigation, is find existing Title V systems and either connect them to sewer or implement this much more advanced septic system that doesn't produce as much nitrogen. So it took months to figure that out, but ultimately a creative solution to get a project moving forward to address an ecological concern that the island had.
I have another example.
I
Okay.
was gonna say little one.
I was thinking about, was it a little fun? Want to go?
Okay, yeah, this one was interesting, because this is a local, so it was a town-owned property that they had, for a long story, they had put in like land banked, thinking they couldn't build affordable housing on it, because they said, oh, we can't build there, it's in the floodplain. So when we were looking with the town and saying, what opportunities are here? They said, oh, we can't look at that one. And we're like, wait a minute, let's look at it again. So ultimately what we did was we brought in, and it was free, so I mean, the land was free from the town. The cost of bringing in all of this soil to basically bring the level up. So we got pre-approval from FEMA that said, if you bring up the level, you won't be in a floodplain anymore. So it was kind of a creative solution to figure out how to develop on land that the town wanted to do that they think they couldn't have done. So I think that was good.
I have another example.
There's always problems.
Actually, that's our world, is a world
Yeah.
of problems, actually.
Yeah.
So we're building a project now which started construction this summer in Pittsburgh. It's 48 units. of senior affordable housing for the LGBTQ plus community. And initially, the project was 52 units, and we had these wonderful community space, really big units. And then our construction number came in, even though we've been working with our contractor throughout design. And it was, I don't know, $5 or $6 million over budget. I mean, we were just basically dead in the water. So we very quickly reconfigured it. We chopped off a story of the building, shrunk the number of units, shrunk the unit size, and now we're in construction. And it's,
And we went from 52 units to 48, so it's not
Yeah.
it wasn't a significant slashing of the project, like a whole floor just got eliminated. We were able to reconfigure things, change how laundry was being done, stuff like that to,
I think we got rid of the dog spa.
actually, I think that exists. We changed where the community room was, so it had better access. I mean, there's a lot of changes that went into it,
Yeah,
but, you know, we basically had to redesign within the existing footprint that we were trying to build a new model.
Betsy and I could echo that. We've had projects where you have to be nimble and you have to just sort of, there's a design solution for anything. And you just, you work with whatever assets you have and you figure things out. I mean, challenges, I think you almost said it, it's just that's what design is. It's just finding those challenges, finding a solution, talking through the problem, and working through it. We usually get there at the end of the day.
Okay, Mark.
Okay, we're in the final stretch here. So we've asked you a bunch of written questions and you've sent us a lot of responses. But as we all know, conveying your intention in writing is often different than conveying your intention in person. So we're just asking you to reflect if there's anything in your written responses to our questions that you'd like to elaborate on here or expound on.
well, I'll say something. You want to
Okay,
go?
no, I can't, no, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say that I mean, we've talked about our experience, but we live in the world of affordable housing. We're a mission-driven firm. This is what we do. And we have a lot of experience doing comprehensive permits. I mean, somebody asked before a question about have we run into troubles, which can we share that? I mean, there's always people that don't like certain things, the traffic, they don't like the density. But we always work in communities where the town and the bulk of the community wants the project to happen. And that, I mean, we make that choice, but we have opportunities elsewhere, but we only want to work where we have partners. So I'm probably repeating what's in there, but I'm just sort of restating that this is what we do and we want to work with you guys.
Okay. I guess it's sort of an opportunity for you to say your last words.
Although
that
we
what
do
that
have one
was?
more question.
Okay, we do have one more
We have
question.
one more question.
Okay. Okay.
Oh, that's right. I'm sorry.
Do you want to ask it, Bill?
Sure. Can you just talk about your experiences using MassWorks grants, like you mentioned for the
Yeah.
sidewalk?
Sure. I mean, we used it in Nubian Square in Roxbury when we did a supermarket project. We got MassWorks funding to build a parking lot. We're using MassWorks on the Vineyard to build roadways because we have these big parcels of land with no infrastructure. We actually got MassWorks for both projects, one in Edgartown and one in Oak Bluffs.
We've used it up in Lowell at an intersection to reconfigure kind of the roadways and make a public park that was in front of our property.
And this was property that you guys owned.
So the vineyard is ones that we own.
We lease, actually. We don't
Yeah,
own. We lease.
long-term lease.
Long-term lease.
And the other two that we mentioned, we were the developers on. We don't own those people. A nonprofit owns
The
them.
thing about MassWorks, though, it's for public infrastructure.
Right.
So you can't use it for your site, but
Right.
for here, it's perfect for
It's
the
for the corner,
sidewalks and
yeah.
helping the town. It comes to you, actually.
Yeah.
The
But
MassWorks.
and we understand the town may have other things they're asking for MassWorks money for. So it was really just to acknowledge
Right.
we can help you with
It's
the
an idea.
application, but we
Yeah.
don't know if there's other priorities in the town that would come first.
And I would say that in our overall capital stack, that $475,000 is not the critical piece. That can be made up somewhere else.
Yeah, yeah.
If it doesn't fit with the town's priorities of MassWorks dollars, then that would be okay.
Can you explain the process of getting a MassWorks grant?
Yeah, you've done it more recently.
So it's a state application. There's a pre-application where you kind of basically give a notice or a letter of intent to the state of like, this is what we would like to use it for, and this is why we think it would apply or fit into the parameters. Then they ask you to submit the full application where you go into much more detail about it. And it's a competitive application, just like the other sources that we're looking at. They're competitive applications.
It goes through the town. So the town of Lexington would submit it. We do it.
We help
We
write
would-
it.
It's in the spring.
Yeah.
And then, like June, it's usually is due in June. It's a community one-stop, it's called. But the town is actually the applicant.
And we would basically answer the items and provide it to you to enter into the
Yes,
system.
right? Could you-
Yes.
The thing about the MassWorks, it's very political. I mean, it's the kind of thing where you could use help from your state rep and state senator.
Yes.
Although we have a lot of brownie points right now because of MBTA, I'm hoping.
Lexington.
Yeah,
Yes.
Lexington, yeah.
Yeah.
So-
And we have very good relations with the Economic Development Department and the Housing Department of the state, so that helps.
So as you know, our RFP proposed an ownership model for you guys, that we would convey the property, the town would convey the property to you. Do you see any issue with that as opposed to a long-term lease in terms of applying for MassWorks?
Well, again, I think the MassWorks money would be going towards the public property piece. We couldn't use the MassWorks money on our parcel. So it's really just, and we don't have the specific what you would want to do at that intersection. We just think if you're adding units there, we really should take a look at more of the connectivity there. But
Yeah.
short answer, no, it's not a problem. I think if there were connecting pieces, sidewalks onto our property, that's part of our development cost for our project, where the sidewalks would connect. Once it went to the public, that would be MassWorks.
Okay.
Back to
Yeah.
Mark's question. Okay.
Yeah, now Mark's final. Go ahead, if you remember.
Do you want me to go? Do you want to go?
Go ahead.
I mean, I think we've done a great job of explaining kind of why we feel uniquely right for this project. It's an incredible opportunity right now at this site. It's an incredibly, a great opportunity for some density, whether that's 47 or 40 units. Our connections with local housing trusts, we hope that you call our references or call people that we've worked with. We feel we have incredibly strong relationships with those that we have worked with, those at the state, our financing institutions. This is well within what we do. This is what we do. It's not a stretch by any means. Every day, this is what we're doing. We have a strong team. I think, as we said, it is convenient that we actually are wrapping up 2 projects right now. This fits well within something that we can jump on right now. And we think it's going to be a fantastic development for the town.
Okay, well, thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for coming in. We really appreciate all the work that you've put into your proposal. It certainly shows the depth and thought that went behind it. And we've had a lot to talk about and really enjoyed discussing your proposal. And just a quick follow-up, if we set up a site visit tomorrow morning, is that still okay? Okay.
Both of them could do it tomorrow, right, Virginia?
Right,
Yeah.
tomorrow
Yeah.
morning?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank
Okay.
you so much.
Thank you.
Oh, and
Thank-
actually, one question. Did you only want to see the developers' properties, or did you want to see the projects from the architects?
No.
You can think about it, get back to
Yes.
us.
Yeah.
We may have to predict.
Okay.
Okay, Thank
We gave you ours. We did not give you the architects. So if you want that, please.
okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to continue on with our second interview with Causeway Development. I'll just run through briefly what our little intro, introduce ourselves first of all. So, and also say that the purpose of this meeting, for those who may have joined us, is for the Affordable Housing Trust to conduct interviews only, and for the Affordable Housing Trust to ask questions. There will be no public comment or questions, but please feel free to email any comments you may have afterwards to the Affordable Housing Trust. at affordablehousingtrust@lexingtonma.gov, and we will take them into consideration as we make our recommendation to the Select Board. So first of all, welcome. I'll introduce myself. I'm Elaine Tung, the Chair of the Affordable Housing Trust. Tiffany, you can introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Tiffany Payne.
And I'm Mark Sandine.
I'm Bill Erickson.
Linda Prosnitz.
Carol Kowalski, Assistant Town Manager for Development.
And then we also have Ragi Ramachandran, who's our staff assistant, who's in the Land Use and Planning Department. So, first of all, thank you for coming in today and providing all of the information that we requested of you on such short notice. We really appreciate that. If you could start off with introducing yourselves, who's on your team, and also how you would like to be addressed. And would you also talk about what partners you're going to be partnering with in terms of this development? After that, we'll start with your presentation, and then we will take approximately 30 minutes for questions from the Affordable Housing Trust. We have at least 8 questions, so please be mindful of the time when you're answering. So go ahead, please.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. My name is Dave Tregorath, and I'm just going to let my team give their name and company affiliation.
Sure. I can start. I'm Jamie Pelletier. I'm a senior associate at Merge Architects. We're on the architecture side.
I'm Dan Hubbard with Causeway Development. I'm Dave's partner.
Kate Kennan with Offshoots. We're the landscape architects on the project.
Beth Whitaker, Principal of Merge Architects. Nice to meet you.
And again, Dave Tregorath with Causeway Development. First of all, congratulations on getting this far. I'm a planning board member in my own town, and I know just getting to the RFP stage is an impressive feat. And also just moving so quickly forward on the selection process. When I read this RFP, I immediately thought of this team that are here today and the others that wanted to be here as well. And because just the combination of design expertise, of landscape architecture, of sustainability, and affordable housing, I just thought this is the dream team for this project and for this site. And so I'm really excited about it. We've worked with Merge and Offshoots, as you may have seen, out in Williamstown, on an amazing project that if we can't get you out there together, we hope you sneak out there. We've done 3 or 4 different projects with Haycon, who are really pushing the envelope on sustainability from a contractor perspective. We have a civil engineer who's also an arborist. Couldn't think of a more perfect site for somebody like that. And Joe, we've done a lot of work with him over the years. And then Sustainable Comfort, really just an amazing group of people who know so much about the changing landscape on sustainability. It is changing every week. And you need to have somebody who is in the weeds on that. Peabody Properties, who manages a bunch of our properties, Aspiring Spirit, we've worked with in different contexts and wants to move more into the community engagement piece around development. So this is an opportunity for them to do that. And then Matt Snell at Nutter, who had probably one of the most complex permitting challenges that we gave him in Chelsea, where we were building up against the Mill Creek. So we've got an amazing team that I think just fits the bill perfectly. And can't wait to show you what they can do today, and hopefully we make it further along. So with that, I want to say a few words just about our portfolio. Nothing really looks the same for a reason. We really look at the site and figure out what the team is that needs to do this project based upon a bunch of inputs, what the community wants, what we're building. Is it affordable? Is it market? One of the things that we really do is we bring private and public investment together to make good projects happen. So we do a lot of market rate work, very high-end type of multifamily. We also do 100% affordable. And there's a lot of cross-pollination that happens in that process with us, where we learn great ideas from market rate housing. We also take the affordable housing that we've learned and incorporated into the market piece. We have mixed income projects. We have historic preservation projects, as I've said. And we really come in and customize each project around what the community is hopeful to see. And the great thing about this project is that you've done a lot of the work of identifying what the community is hoping to see. So we can cut right to the chase in some ways. And these are projects that we've done all across the Commonwealth. We are only based in Massachusetts. We've only worked in Massachusetts. We intend to keep it that way for as long as my children love seeing me at night. And, you know, I can drive home, be home, and that's the great thing. And so we can kind of drive around and see all of our projects and be home at night. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to Dan, who's going to talk a little bit about the numbers.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me. Again, Dan Hubbard. I'm Dave's partner at Causeway Development, and I focus a lot on financing of these projects, particularly the affordable housing ones. We tend to be in pretty much every single now EOHLC round, either for our own projects or for consulting on behalf of some nonprofits that we work with, and have been doing that for about 15 years now. So we know this world really well, and we know the need for this housing really well. In our last all affordable deal that we finished, which was in Chelsea, 1005 Broadway, we finished about a year ago. It had 38 units, all affordable. It had about 3,500 applications, I believe, for those 38 units. The need is just astronomical compared to what we can do, and you know, every little dent that we can do and how we can spread it out throughout the greater Boston area and throughout the Commonwealth is also very important to us. We also looked here to try to make this as much of a mixed income community as possible. So we have set it up to have 4 area median income brackets, all the way from below 30% AMI, which is about 15% of the units, up to 80% AMI, another 15%. The bulk of the units, as you'll see, are at about 60% area median income, which is mostly related to just how the low-income housing tax credit program works. And just to give a little bit of a snapshot of, you know, what that means, I'm sure this group is aware of it, but for anybody else, for a 3-person household, you know, you're talking folks making $0 to $44,000 in the 30% AMI category, but in 60, you know, it's families making up towards 90,000 and over 100,000 in the 80% AMI category. We made sure to emphasize that we had enough deep levels of affordability, and what we mean by that are the 30 and 50% categories. It's a requirement in the state to have at least 13% at 30, and then the rest can be at 60. We do find it's really helpful to make sure that, you know, people in the middle don't get lost, that everybody throughout this range has an opportunity to live here. We also wanted to emphasize, especially in Lexington and in all communities with great access to opportunity for families, is having family-sized units. So again, the program requirement is generally 10% 3 bedrooms. We've doubled that here with 20% of the units 3 bedroom, and 80% of the units overall are 2 bedroom or larger, potentially house a family. We think this is a great opportunity for anybody that has the chance to live here. We wanted to make sure that our unit mix spoke to that. We can come back to this.
Yeah.
No need to do this. If you have any budget questions, we can circle back.
Yeah.
All right, great. So let's talk about design. We're Merge Architects. We're based in Boston, right in the seaport. We do most of our housing. We do a ton of housing. We do most of our housing in the New England area, but also throughout the U.S. We just did a workforce housing project in Jackson, Wyoming. We've done a lot of work in Detroit. So we get urban infill, suburban, and rural sites. As everyone knows, there are no as-of-right projects in the Boston area, so we are going in front of the neighborhood community trying to find a contemporary interpretation of the vernacular in that area as much as we can. We are contemporary architects, so a little bit unlike Dave, like this is our work.
And it's both city, Cable Mills, and Williamstown that we worked on with Dave and Dan. It was an amazing project, upper left, upper right image. But this is our hand. Next slide. We are, like I said, really well versed in the community process. It's not our neighborhood, it's theirs, and we get that. So we are very open to a collaboration to come up with something really awesome. Next slide. The parcel, everybody knows it, right off of Lowell Street, busy street, but beautifully wooded kind of private site because of the woodland area. Next slide. And so our site plan, so we strategized how to preserve as much of the woodlands as possible. Kate's gonna dig into that a little bit more in a couple of slides. But our strategy for the site plan is essentially this, a one-way loop road. Our priorities were how to hide the parking. So we have it underneath the buildings, but it's at grade, which we'll show you some images. And then really not to, no matter what, not to do 1 or 2 extruded big boxes, which is so much of what we see with affordable housing. We work a lot with tight budgets on our housing projects. We know some tricks to make it look amazing and sing without breaking the budget. And we're trying to implement those strategies on this project. In terms of the vernacular, there are a ton of amazing single-family homes in Lexington. So how do you make this look like kind of like that, but also multifamily buildings? So we have designed 4 buildings that feel kind of like 8 because of the way they break up. 10 units in each building, 40 units. The single loop road coming off of Lowell Street. We've saved a little bit of that stone wall, which seems sacred. And also kind of using some of it, the big boulders for some of the landscaping coming within. We have an amenity building really fast in the middle there, pavilion for outdoor space and canopy space for the residents. And then really trying to create this kind of external vehicular loop with the internal pedestrian green space. So with that, I will hand it over to Kate.
Perfect.
Just one more.
One more.
Oh, wait, one more. Right, so here it is in 3D, even better. Coming off of Lowell Road on the left, you see 6 visitor parking spaces where we're shielding the trash. If anyone's interested, that's where we're gaming it, up at that upper left. And then you can really see how the 4 buildings read more as 8 with sloped roofs facing due south for a PV array. Looking for energy efficiency where we can, and I'll get into the architecture a little bit more in the future slides.
And just one more about just the parking level, sorry.
The parking level, so again, each building has 1 parking space per unit. We have the 3 beds on the first floor, which is great because they walk right out to the green space. And then of course, there's the entry nestled between the 2, kind of a barbell planning that you see that small box in the middle, which is the entry for each building. Next slide.
So as the landscape architect, I get very excited about the site. And what's so nice here is the ability to connect people with each other, both with the natural environment, right? It's such a beautiful wooded site. And the idea is to start first with an exacting tree survey to really position the buildings around the existing trees as much as we can and create this central woodland amenity for people to be able to pull that feeling of the outside in and be able to work around those existing trees. So as we had kind of mentioned in our narrative, the north site has more invasive species in it. It has more Norway maple, it has a few old sugar maples. The idea there is a little bit more intense development on that side, really trying to keep more of the native plant community on the south side more intact. And then also, of course, really not disturbing the existing woodland. And then the next slide, please. There's only 3 little amone amenity spaces. The idea is most of it is about reconnecting the ecology that's already there and making it low maintenance, right? So we know that rabbits are really crazy and the deer pressure. So really thinking about plant communities that'll live in that native environment, reconnect it, and be low maintenance for the long term without a lot of mowing. So that's sort of the look of it. And then the next slide is also just this idea about when we do have mown areas, keeping them really carefully planned in places where people will use them, and thinking about how we can get the aesthetics really clearly out of those native plants and protecting the river too at the same time.
I think I have 3 minutes. Is it okay if I stand up?
Sure.
Because I feel like you guys can't hear me. Okay, so you all know your rich history, Lexington, Lincoln. Six Moon Hill of modernist architecture. We know it's very historical, wouldn't want to touch that here, but there is a modernist and contemporary history, so we're of course drawing from that. Next slide. And so the project, again, it's 4 of these, which look like 2. So 4 times 2 equals 8. The kind of the highlights of the building is each unit has outdoor space. Either you're walking out off your patio into that central green space, or you have your own balcony, which overlooks that central green space. So super great for surveillance of kids running around the site. The PV array, which is facing due south. And then we're looking for a cladding material that's very rich and warm and a kind of very durable wood cladding is what we're leaning toward. And then that was the view from the sort of the park side in the center of the site. This is a view looking at that loop road with the parking underneath. Next slide. And then quickly the layout, upper left, again, each building has 1 parking space per unit. That's the first floor. You can see how you walk into unit 1 and unit 2, the 3 beds on the ground level that are right off of the street. And then as we go up, we have a single stair, we have the elevator, and then 4 units on each floor. A combination of 2 3 beds, 2 1 beds, and 6 2 beds. Next slide. And then just an elevation. The upper one is looking through the landscape zone in the center to those balconied units in that amenity space in the middle. The bottom elevation is the other view from the loop road, seeing the parking at the ground level with the amenity space in the middle. Next slide. And then a view coming into the site off of Lowell. Those are boulders we're proposing to use from the part of the stone wall that we may not be preserving. And then the sugar maple at the front that Kate was talking about. And so we're really trying to position the buildings around these trees that we can save and want to save. And then again, just showing you the loop road and the architecture of the building. Next slide. And then a view looking into that green space from the loop road and getting a sense of it's a combination of the woodland and some kind of seating benches, picnic tables. Next slide. And then a view within it. So you can see all this life. You've got the balconies overlooking this great green space, which is a little bit of hardscape, mainly green, soft space scape, and then the patios from the 3-bedroom units that look out on the ground level. Next slide. And a view from one of those 3 bedrooms, which looks out to the amenity space where people can have birthday parties and picnics and maybe grill out. Next slide. And then a view looking down the green space again. This is looking due north. You can see the roofs sloping south. Next slide, we're almost done. And then a view looking back at that loop road coming into the site with the natural vegetation to the right. And then a view looping back around, coming in. This is, you can see the hillside coming off of Lowell where there's a natural incline in the topography there. So if I went straight up that road, I would take a left and get back on Lowell. Next slide. And that's the end. Why us? In 20 seconds.
I'll close out by saying this is what we could do in about a month and a half or so. Imagine what we can do if we're given this opportunity. We hope we have the opportunity to continue the conversation. This is just an amazing team, and we think we bring some of the expertise that would be a compliment to all the efforts you all have made. So that'll be fine.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So now we're going to move into the question. My very first question is, how do you want to be addressed? By your first names, by last, or?
I think first names.
First names. And I'm sorry,
Beth.
I didn't,
I'm
Beth.
Beth.
Thank you, Beth. Okay, great. So what's going to happen is we have at least 8 questions. I'll start, and then we're just going to move down the line. So first question for you is, please elaborate on the proposal, on your team's success in community engagement, plans for this project, and what have you learned from your community engagement that may not have gone as planned in other projects?
I think I can take the first crack at that. We've worked in suburban locations where we've had single-family homes completely surrounding sites and put quite a bit of density in those locations. And by density, I mean multifamily buildings meeting a need in the community. As you can imagine, anytime you're building in somebody's backyard, it is a change that can be difficult. And the way that we approach that basically is just acting like a neighbor from day one, right? Is going to our new neighbors and saying, can you talk to us about your concerns? Can you tell us what you like or don't like about this design? It doesn't mean that everything that gets said or communicated in that happens, but oftentimes, and I'll give you some examples, we do make adjustments based upon what the feedback is from the immediate abutters and from the larger community. Example is in Reading at Ace Flats, completely surrounded by single-family homes. Went through an extensive review process. And the first thing that we did was we went and sat with our neighbors and said, what are your concerns about this project? What would you like to see? We made probably 2 or 3 different design changes as a result of that process that I think made the project better and certainly brought them on board. Ultimately, we had their support, and we were talking a 0 lot line condition, where we were building right up to their backyards. Hamilton, another one. We built right in the middle of Hamilton, and had single-family homes on all sides. Again, what are their concerns? And we talked in such detail as like where the fence could go. Does it have to go right there? Can it go like this because I always keep my, lawnmower shed right there? Yeah, no problem. That goes a really long way in terms of just being a neighbor for the long term. We're gonna be here, we're gonna own this for a really long time. So we understand it's a two-way street, both in terms of dealing with our neighbors and also dealing with the larger community.
Yeah, I know we don't have that much time on this one question, but I can't tell you how many people's butters' kitchens I've been in to see what their view is when they have their morning coffee. We have lowered our building 8.5 inches exactly before to accommodate one person's view. Like, we get it. It's not our neighborhood, it's their neighborhood. We want them to love it. And it's funny because we're always asking for more density than the neighborhood wants, no matter where we're building. And it's kind of like, we need housing. We don't want you guys to hate the building, we want you to love it. What can we do to help you love 9 units instead of 3, or 40 instead of 20, or whatever the delta is between what they say they won't go beyond and what we know our clients need to make it a viable project. So we get that. And I kind of love the process because, I mean, housing is emotional, right? It's their homes. So we're not building a museum, we're not building a hotel. We've done a lot of different kinds of projects. This is housing. So we get it. And I think you guys need real data. I will tell you something we're really proud of. Jamie and I have been working on a project in Cambridge at 2400 Mass Ave. It's new, it's fresh. It just got through the Cambridge Planning Board unanimously for the first time ever. They said they've never had such a positive experience with the team before because we did our homework with the community months in advance and changed our project and the zoning to accommodate what they really wanted. And it was awesome because we've been doing this a long time. And finally it was like a unanimous, like, this is great. It was a love fest. There's a great article about it in Cambridge Day. 2400 Mass Ave, I'm not doing it with Dave and Dan, I'm sorry. But it is 60 units, and it's a full block. And we're addressing Mass Ave, it's got like the tall 6-story, down to 2 and 3 family street, down to a single family street, to a kind of a nothing street. And our building is addressing all of those edges. So we totally geek out on how to deal with context and do it, we think, well. And not messy and hodgepodge. So anyway, yes. Did I answer it?
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Follow-ups? Okay, Tiffany?
My question is, the RFP sets forth a preference for approximately 40 units. Why did you choose the number of units you're proposing?
Yeah, I'm happy to speak to that. So we did take our lead from the RFP of trying to find approximately 40 as a starting point. So I think we aimed at this and said, let's see what fits here in the 35 to 45 unit range. We nailed on exactly 40 once we started setting out these buildings. 10 units really fit really well. Doing 4 of them made sense. Doing a 5th made the site, frankly, too tight. It could fit, but it would change what this looks like, change what this feels like. And we thought that the 4 sets of 10 were perfect. It also happens to line up very well with affordable housing financing and the rules in the qualified allocation plan for a maximum of 9% LIHTC really maxes out at exactly 40 units. So that's the size that makes this very efficient from a funding perspective as well. So that was a secondary concern, but definitely one that lined up nicely.
Okay, Mark?
Okay, so can you talk a little bit about your team's bandwidth and your timeline for moving forward? We're sort of wondering how many projects you have in the timeline, how many projects you're planning to do at the same time and as this one.
You're looking at me.
So I think Dan can speak a little bit more about sort of what we have in our pipeline. But we're very, very picky about what we select to chase after. We ask this question, why us, every single time, because frankly, you have 3 other great teams and others that could do 100% affordable housing project in Lexington. And we first asked that question, and as part of it, because we just don't want to overextend ourselves. It's part of the reason why we don't go outside of Massachusetts, and it's something where it is, from an accountability perspective, Dan and myself, and we bring in great teams to sort of come around that. So what we have in the pipeline right now, we just finished 1005 Broadway, 100% affordable in Chelsea. We hope to be able to show you that. We have in the funding round right now, we just got awarded 142 Main in Brockton, which is a historic renovation rehab of a former office building into 30 apartments. That is also being funded by UHLC. And then we have Winchester Waterfield. Right at the MBTA station in Winchester, we won similar public RFP process. That will likely be going into the next round. As you probably know, you can put in 2 per round as a sponsor. And so those are the projects that we have right now in the pipeline. So we feel like this fits perfectly. We have room in our pipeline to move forward quickly with it, put it in as soon as we possibly can, and hopefully get awards from UHLC on as soon as we possibly can as well.
And we have 1 more under construction right now in Jamaica Plain, a 45-unit affordable home ownership project that should be complete by the end of the year. So we, by the end of the year, should be done with our projects that are in construction, hopefully starting our Brockton project beginning of next year. That'll be under construction. And then Winchester and hopefully this in the rounds for when they get funded. And you probably know this, but timing for the round has been a focus of what we're thinking about. It's a little tight to see if we can get into the next one. We always make a point to put in a pre-application, whether we're going to get it or not. Call up Kate Racer, have a conversation, make sure she and the department know that this project exists, it's coming, even if it's not going to fit because it won't be permitted by February when they would like it. They still can think of it when they're thinking out their next 5 years of funding. So I do know this kind of project where the town is taking the lead, finding land, and kind of driving the process is exactly what they like to see, what we love to see, and wants to be rewarded. So more towns in Massachusetts decide to take up that process as well.
As the architect, should I answer this too? Or
Go ahead.
yeah,
Please.
we only have so much time. We're a little bigger than Dave and Dan. We're 20, 25 people, depending. At Merge, we've been doing this It's been in practice since 2003, so quite a while. We can handle we can handle a lot of work at the same time. That's kind of what the profession is about. Having said that, we're wrapping up 2 housing projects right now in Detroit. They'll be finished in the next couple of months. We are starting, hopefully, this Cambridge project that I just told you in terms of housing. And I have different teams doing different projects. Jamie has been with Merge for 12 years.
13.
Oh my gosh, 13 years.
Been a while.
A-team, amazing project manager, designer, just extraordinary. So he would be on this project through the end, and I'm so psyched he's available in the office to actually work on it, because like I said, I have a bunch of different teams. So yeah, we're good. We are always looking for more work. I'm always baffled at firms who are saying, yeah, I can get to it in a year, or we've never we've never turned down a project like that for that reason. So this is our sweet spot, and we are 25 people because we can be full service. I'm not looking to be a 50, 60, 80 person firm, because we're pretty hands-on until, if you look at our work, it takes a pretty hands-on approach to pull off the kind of work we're interested in. So we're very available. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Bill?
Yes, I'm an architect, and the easy answer is that's why God created night.
And weekends.
Anyway, so my question is about the land disposition agreement, and everybody had comments on that. So the question really is, in the event that the town could agree to none of the modifications to that agreement, like how might that affect your project?
As you know, we brought in our legal team to take a look at it, to just respect the idea and appreciate the idea that, you know, getting this stuff out on the table now is important. They certainly said, Dave, if you had to sign this, you can, but here are the risks you're going to take. And I think we would be willing to take some of those risks, given our background and experience and what you all have been able to do to date. But of course, we'd prefer not to. And so that's the reason we provided the comment. But happy to have a further discussion around it.
Okay, Linda?
So I want to talk about just this project here and what challenges you might see that will relate to the Lowell, working Lexington, or the Lowell street location. Open-ended, anything that might come to your
I should make one comment just from a landscape perspective, is obviously Lowell is a very busy corridor, as you mentioned, and it's really loud, right? And thinking about how you situate a development within those trees and within that bowl, so that we preserve all of the trees along Lowell to be able to have that feeling like you're in the woods, because it is so easy to say you're not going to take down trees and then you're in there affecting much more than you want to do. But with that natural topography, we can really keep that slope as much untouched as possible and really try to stay away from the river. And then also, just again, as Dave was talking about with the neighbors, right, there you also have a couple very close abutters, and making sure the landscape is treated in a way that feels like everyone's there because of the woods, right, and because you want to live in that green environment. So you want to make sure everyone has a part of that. So I think it's a challenge, but I think it's a challenge that can, you know, really be thoughtfully crafted, especially with this kind of one-way loop, smaller building scenario. So
I think we were pretty excited to see when we walked the site that it's fairly flat.
in the center. Yeah.
And there's some invasive species that, you know, Kate can touch on a little bit more that don't seem as precious as some of the more native vegetation and trees that we're trying to preserve. So that's all great. I think for us, it's the obvious budget, right? Trying to pull all of this off on budget. And we have some ideas about how we can do that, and materials and so on and so forth. But those were the biggest. I don't think the site is that challenging because it's relatively flat. Like Kate said, we got that grade bowl to buffer to Lowell. We probably are worried about budget.
No, I mean, to be honest, I think from my perspective, you know, the amount of building area that's left over by the time we preserve all the trees and everything else is going to be a very challenging building environment. Seems like a large area, but we're used to working in zero lot line conditions. So instead of our, zero lot line being another building, it's a tree, is the way we're going to look at it from a construction perspective. I think I'm really interested to get into the traffic study piece and advance that and just understand how people are going to come and go with existing traffic going back and forth. We don't think there's a lot of traffic generated, but we want to make sure that everybody's safe coming and going from the site. And I think, from a financing and sort of numbers perspective, this is a straightforward project. And so I think from that perspective, we're very comfortable about how to do this. The question is, how much can we pack in from a sustainability, from a design perspective? How much can we push the envelope to get the most value, so to speak, on all those components that you want to see in addition to affordable housing? So that's where we're going to be really focused.
As a follow-up,
Yeah.
quite sure how to frame this, but it's really about the budget and what you're trying to pack in. Do you see, I guess, in what your proposal is any vulnerabilities that that what you put in the budget may or may not work, or something that might be on the edge a little bit? Or you had mentioned sort of
Yeah.
materials and what sort of things
Yeah.
you're doing.
Simply because that's every housing project we ever do, because we work a lot with developers and we know there's very little wiggle. But because of that, we've become quite seasoned at doing the kind of work that we do within the budgetary constraints. So there's nothing specific. I think we've designed 4 repeated buildings. So there's an efficiency of repetition without it looking like an extruded box. So we feel really good about that. We think that the cladding can be done in such a way, just with these horizontal bands and a few different ways, trying to find the right product that will look fantastic. So I'm actually not that concerned about it. It's just about keeping it all on the road as we move throughout the design.
And I just want to echo something I had said in response to the questions, which was, we've just lived through, coming out of COVID, huge amount of inflation, huge change in interest rates. And I finally feel like we're starting to stabilize on the sort of what is available from a supplies perspective. What's the labor situation? What are interest rates going to be? What's inflation? I mean, the last 4 years, I think you talk to anybody in the sort of construction world, and it's been some of the most challenging environment they've ever seen. And so I think the good news for this project is we've sort of like ridden through those waves and coming to a more predictable outcome. Our 10 Stoneleigh project, Berkeley Flats, we're going to end that actually under budget. We've spent almost none of the contingency there, and that's great. I think we've sort of learned the lessons of, okay, we got to order switchgear way early. We've got to do it this way from the perspective of a cost perspective. We've got a huge amount of regulation related to sustainability, which is coming, that also came into play during that time period. So I think we've seen a lot of turbulence, and we've learned those lessons and applied them here.
I will just say, broadly speaking, one of the nice things about developing affordable housing is the state is realistic about what it costs to build everywhere. If the costs have gone up 20+% over the past 3 years, they didn't just cut us off and say you can't build this anymore. We're able to bring in the funding, make this work. What really you need to focus on with the project is just not being much more expensive than all the other projects, the 50 others that are trying to be the 30 that are awarded. You need to be in the ballpark. And I think, this is an amazing design and looks really, really beautiful. It's extremely efficient. If we get down to how much hallway there is, it's very little. And that makes this a very cost-effective design. So from a, can we hit that number, whatever it is, that makes it, similar to what other affordable housing developers are developing, this exactly here makes me very confident that we'll get there.
Can I just say one thing? We've done a lot of market rate as well, and the irony, elephant in the room, I think, about affordable housing is it costs more to build per foot than market rate often, which is messed up, right? So we are used to building for less per foot than a typical affordable housing project is able to build for, because we have to do certain size units and so on and so forth. So there are reasons for that are built into the system, but we're actually used to hitting lower numbers per foot to build. Yeah.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. So we have at least 3 more questions. So, and we'll have to hurry. But I think the next question actually dovetails with what we were just talking about. Does your pre-development funding, which I know you're going to be applying for, does that give you flexibility to respond to changes in terms of, as you're going through the design process, through the comp permit process, if there's changes with that, are you going to have enough flexibility for that?
We are. We use a combination of our own funding, and in addition to that, our own line of credits. We have our own funding, our own line of credit, and then we'd likely, as we think we said, go after a pre-development line. All 3 of those sources are expecting that change will happen around various aspects of this. And we've been through that process with all those different funders on many different projects. So,
Okay. Tiffany.
Yeah, so I know you guys talked a little bit about you guys' projects and you're facing some challenges, but this is, the next question is basically describing a project where you face a particular challenge and how did you respond?
trying to figure out which one to pick because they all have their challenges. I think just recognizing the time, and I think 1005 Broadway in Chelsea, I think hopefully we get to take you to see it. 100% affordable, 38 units in Chelsea. It was a site that was, from a regulatory perspective, unbuildable, and up against the Mill Creek, beautiful creek that's tidal, right at the gateway to Chelsea, and immediately abutting single family homes along a busy commercial corridor. And again, from a zoning perspective, from a Chapter 91 title, permitting perspective, it was unbuildable. And I think the way that we overcame it, really, it's a project where the landowner came to us and said, Dave, I cannot figure this project out. Like, I don't know, it seems like I cannot. And they basically nearly gave us the land and said, if you can figure this out, we will give it to you. It was a longtime investor of ours who was really, really frustrated. And the first thing that we did was, number one, we had a good relationship with the people of Chelsea. We know that we're in this for the long term, and everything that we've done to date is gonna help us on whatever next thing happens, right? We know that people in Lexington are gonna call people in Chelsea and say, how were they, right? Everything leads to something else. And we just started in City Hall talking about what City Hall wanted to see. We started in the neighborhood with city councilors talking about what they wanted to see. And I didn't really know what was gonna come of it. It could have been market rate housing. It could have been affordable housing. It could have been mixed income. It could have been any number of things. But I think just sitting down and talking with people about what they wanted to see and see if there was any commonality. Sometimes we have those conversations and we realize there is no agreement whatsoever, and we're never going to get there, right? And it's at the point where we back away, frankly. But there is times where we see kind of common threads, right, through what everybody wants to see. And I think that's, when we could start from a place where you all have sort of set the table so beautifully, we can pick up and run with it, and really hopefully bring it home. So that's, really talking to people, relationships, building relationships over the long term is how we solve a lot of problems.
Mark.
So we've asked you a bunch of written questions and we've received your questions and read them, but as we all know, what you put in writing is not necessarily what you would say in person, so we just wanted to give you an opportunity to elaborate on any of the written responses that we provided, if there's something you want us to know with a little nuance.
Uh-oh, I don't have my cheat sheet on this.
They're really good at asking questions. I wasn't expecting the LDA one either. I think just to elaborate, I don't think we've talked about Williamstown that much, and I want to talk about that one a little bit more. And I worked with Jamie. I spent a lot of hours with Jamie in Williamstown.
A lot of stuff.
Jamie hasn't gotten a lot of airtime here. He's amazing in terms of working with builders and towns to figure out how to sort of blend this vision into what can happen. And I think as well with Kate, I go back to Williamstown often, and I am just shocked at the landscape that has emerged there 7 to 8 to 9 years later, where you really have this riverfront and you've got these fields and mountains sort of across the way. And Kate came to me and said, we want to see that come in, right? We want to invite that in. And I think Beth took that a step further and we want it inside.
There's
using
window
everything.
boxes
And
with plants on them in the inside.
And it is,
In a courtyard.
it's just a really cool place that I think really shows what this team can do. And we haven't been able to find the moment where we can bring that to affordable housing. I've worked with Kate at 1005 Broadway in Chelsea on other affordable deals that we've worked on together. We've never worked together with Beth in an affordable housing sort of environment. I know they can do an amazing job and they can sort of push the envelope and show what's possible with affordable housing and design, efficiency, things like that you see, and just sort of blending the environment and the built together in a way that just you get there. And I think if you stand at the river in Williamstown, you're I see what can happen in Lexington.
Yeah.
And so I think,
Rendering.
yeah, if you've got an image of that, I just want to
Or
emphasize
just a rendering.
that a bit more, because I think we haven't really talked about what an
With the
accomplishment
site.
that was. And since then, we've had Williamstown pass more aggressive zoning related to multifamily housing. I think that's the other piece that you see. Often when we do projects, we get invited back to do more, and to me, that's the best thing that we could say about ourselves, is that people say, can you come back and do Haverhill? We did one project, they said, can you go buy the one that's 3 doors down and do something similar? And we did. And so just those pieces that I just wanted to emphasize. Anything else?
Yeah, I would say at Merge, we are determined to do better affordable housing out there in the world. There's so much not awesome affordable housing out there in the world. And it doesn't make sense to me because everybody should live in an amazing home, right? I'm a big believer in multifamily, whether it's in the woods or an infill in the city. The efficiency of it, there's just too many people who need homes, and making it feel something they're really proud of. Even if you rent for your entire life, it's your home. And so we want it to feel like a home, not just a jazzy contemporary box, but a home. And so for us, speaking of Cable Mills, and Kate and our whole team, it was already in the country, so it was already gorgeous. But bringing that into the project, we did the multifamily building, which we called the Modern Mill, and then we did a series of these duplexes. And they were 2 and 3 bedroom units, and in the 3 bedroom unit, we literally inserted a 4x6 courtyard in the middle of the living room where there's a tree. The upper right image has that. We don't have the plan here. So even if it's small, this outdoor space is so powerful, and it makes your life sing. And so we are big into the outdoors, big into making affordable housing better. And this site is such a sweet spot for us. Like, we're so excited about this project. To get the band back together.
I would also say that there was a really important question about universal design in that list of questions, and we've really approached that at every facet of the project. Obviously, universal design goes much further than accessibility. So you could do all of these units. They're 3-story buildings, so all of the upper floors would not necessarily need to be accessible. But we've added an elevator to every single unit. Parking is underneath everybody's units, so the distance from your car to your unit is short.
Without having a shovel.
Yes, exactly. We've strategically located 3-bedroom units on the ground floor to help encourage families, multi-generational living. Those are really important things. Every single unit has private outdoor space. We really want to create a community that's equitable for everybody. Every single unit is single level, so every unit is accessible. We just think that's really, really important. Even just down to the street, trying to avoid curbs where you might have issues with a wheelchair or a stroller. Like, they're really important pieces of universal design that go a lot further than accessibility.
I forgot to mention the pedestrian pathway that we have that's part of the loop road. It's a shared laneway.
And for biking, yeah.
And for biking.
Yeah.
So just, I'm guessing the answer is gonna be obvious, but the elevator goes down to the parking level as well.
Correct, yes. So if you go, let me go to
That's
the,
the first.
Ground level. Yep.
yes.
And we did the same thing at the Modern Mill.
Right through here, yes, you take the elevator up and every floor has access from the elevator, every unit is single level.
Thank you.
Okay, we have one last question. Bill?
Well, this is a downer after that last one, but
Should
Just
have been
if-
the next to
You can
last
skip it.
question.
I know we should. Well, it's just and briefly, just what your most recent experiences with securing state funding for 100% affordable housing projects and going through a comprehensive permit process.
Yeah, I'll just point to 1005 Broadway, which is our most recent 100% affordable rental project where we got all the state funding, obviously. And then the other home ownership is our 45 unit Brooklyn Flats project, which is going to be done in December. That's 100% affordable home ownership.
Both 40Bs?
Neither were 40Bs. So all permitted under different local zoning.
And most recently, we got funded our Brockton project in the latest EOHLC round. They're not quite ready to start that one yet, but we've been funded. And in our consulting capacity, I mean, more or less, we get funded pretty much every round in some project or another. Has been our take. From the comprehensive permit question, I think our latest permitting process with Waterfield Winchester had the option to go through 40B or through local downtown zoning. We went through local downtown zoning. So we haven't started that process. We haven't done that process there. We have begun the process on a couple other projects, though.
Can I just thought on the Broadway and Brockton, are you the main developer, the sole developers of those?
Yes.
Both
Well,
for Broadway?
Broadway is a partnership with the neighborhood developers, formerly Chelsea Neighborhood Developers. So the local CDC there, that is often what we do when there is a CDC in a specific neighborhood in Boston or in a specific town, ending up partnering with them. But that was 60% our deal. So we were the managing member and pushing that project forward. Brockton will be entirely ours.
Brockton's all. And what was it again? Brockton's all affordable, or was it?
Brockton has 20 affordable units and 10 market rate units above retail.
And you've got state funding for that?
We got state funding, also historic tax credit funding, because it's an existing vacant historic building.
And have you worked to get have you worked with towns to get MassWorks funding?
We have. We've worked with We did with the city of Boston a long time ago, gotten some MassWorks funding. We've also gone in, portion of Brockton will be funded a little bit with some MassWorks money. So we're very familiar with the one-stop process and all the different funding sources that are available through that, whether it be mass development or directly through any of the other state agencies.
And do you see that working with this development at all?
So I think one of the things, will be a question is the traffic piece and just how do we, if there's an opportunity there to do improvements outside the project, that could be a potential funding source. It's an opportunity. There is potentially, we haven't thought about it. I don't think it would be necessary, but there's a site readiness program, which we've used before, which could be another opportunity as a way of funding it. But those are the couple of things that pop into my mind as opportunities.
Any other follow-ups?
I do. It sounds like, just going back to the comp permit question, that the comp permits go through the ZBA, and on given sort of zoning experience you have, you didn't mention any direct 40Bs, but what do you see as sort of your ability and expertise in getting through a comp permit process?
So, in terms of working with all the relevant boards, select board, ZBA, I think we can point to Winchester Waterfield is one where we work very closely with the select board in that scenario, and work very closely with the planning board related to the local zoning sort of path site plan approval that we went through. In every project we do, not one thing has been as of right. So it is always going through either ZBA, planning board, select board, some combination. 1005 Broadway, same thing. In addition to that, we had Chapter 91 at the state DEP level that we had to go through. So in terms of going through the 40B process, we have not done a lot of 40Bs, mostly because we've chosen other paths in cooperation with the towns that we've worked with, and just evaluate what's the best way. And if 40B is the best way to go here, we have an amazing legal team that can help us in terms of dotting the I's and crossing the T's, in terms of making sure we go through all the steps right. And we are fully confident that we can work through ZBA, select board, whoever, to make sure they understand it and work with them to make sure we do the process correctly.
Okay, great. Any last words you want to tell us before we conclude?
I just appreciate such a thorough process. We all do so many interviews. You guys have really been super organized, and I have really enjoyed it. And I hope you let us build this.
Amen.
Well, I want to thank you again for coming in. We really appreciate, we know we gave you some very tight time frames last week to get us information, and you guys crushed it, so thank you very much, along with everybody else. And we will definitely be in touch about the site visits. I neglect to mention, we are recording this on our LexMedia as well as by Zoom, but I will send you an email later on if you wouldn't mind giving your presentation to LexMedia, just so that we'll have better quality of video, which will be being posted online in the next couple of days. So that would be great, and we will get back to you as soon as possible today with site visits. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your time.
So right now we have Metro West Collaborative Development coming in for their interview. Thank you so much for coming. I'm going to introduce again that the purpose of this meeting is for the Affordable Housing Trust to conduct interviews only, and for the Affordable Housing Trust to ask questions. There will be no public comment, but please feel free to email any comments you may have afterwards to the Affordable Housing Trust at affordablehousingtrust@lexingtonma.gov, and we will take them into consideration as we make our recommendation to the Select Board. So thanks everybody for coming. Welcome. First of all, thanks for providing that information we requested last week on such short notice. It's very helpful to us. We also want to really thank you for all the hard work that went into your proposal. It shows, and we, love all the thought and care that went into it. If we could start off, we're going to introduce ourselves first. I am Elaine Tung, the chair, and starting with Tiffany.
Tiffany Payne.
Mark Sandine?
Bill Erickson?
Linda Process.
I'm Carol Kowalski, I'm the Assistant Town Manager for Development.
And we have Ragi Ramachandran, who's on our staff who works for the Land Use and Housing Department. So as you know, we're going to have a 15-minute presentation first of all, and then we're going to go through some questions that we have for you. So if, when you're introducing yourselves, if you could introduce yourselves as well as any of your development partners that may be here, and also how you would like to be addressed by your first names or however. And also wanted to let you know that during the question phase, we have at least 8 questions. So if you could please time your responses accordingly. So first of all, go ahead and start with your presentation.
Wonderful. Okay, well, good afternoon, members of the Affordable Housing Trust, RFP Working Group, and residents of Lexington.
I'm sorry if you could speak a little
Sure,
louder.
yes, I know we don't have microphones. I'll try and speak louder. Okay, is that better? Okay. Thank you very much for inviting us here today to discuss our proposal for parcel 6844 located on Bull Street. My name is Caitlin Madden, and I am the Executive Director of Metro West Collaborative Development. I'm joined by Sharon Small, our Director of Real Estate. Our team members for this RFP response include many of the most experienced and well-respected teams in the business. In the interest of time, Sharon and I are going to be walking through the presentation, but we have members of our project team with us here today who can respond to questions during the Q&A, including Michelle from Icon Architecture, Don from CHA Solutions, our civil engineer, and Rebecca from RBLA Design, our landscape architect. And first names are great. Our other team members in the response include Maloney Properties, our professional third-party property management company, and Klein Hornig, our real estate counsel. Just briefly, a bit about Metro West City and our history for those who don't already know us. We are a 33-year-old regional 501c3 nonprofit community development corporation. We were founded in Watertown and are now based in Newton. We are the only certified community housing development organization, or CHODO, for the West Metro Home Consortium, of which Lexington is a member. A designation which means we have a proven capacity for developing and owning affordable housing. And that gives us access to special set-asides of funds for the development of affordable housing. We also have a proven track record for being a trusted, mission-oriented, skilled, and collaborative partner. Metro West CD currently has a 25-town primary target area, which includes the town of Lexington. Our efforts to promote affordable housing fall into 4 main categories. We connect people to it by assisting members of the community in their search for affordable housing. We help people in our region remain stably housed by providing emergency rental and direct financial assistance. We advocate for it by both working with local constituents who want to encourage affordable housing and by engaging with legislators on housing issues. And finally, a big focus of ours is building affordable housing. Metro West CD has deep ties to the town of Lexington. Lexington housing advocates played a key role in Metro West CD's regionalization back in 2012. And since then, Metro West CD has been involved in local housing efforts in a number of ways, which you can see listed here. After many years of work, we are excited that the Lexington Affordable Housing Trust has been established, and that an RFP has been issued for affordable housing on town-owned land. Metro West CD is very experienced in working with towns to develop town-owned land, as you'll see in just a second, and building housing at Lowell Street would be an exciting culmination of many years of efforts here. So I'm going to quickly walk through our most recent development experience, but additional details on each of our developments were included in our RFP response. First, Glenbrook Way is a 2-phase, 92-unit intergenerational campus located in Medway, Massachusetts.
Phase 1 was completed in 2021, and Phase 2 was completed in early 2024. Then we moved to 62 Packard Street in Hudson, Massachusetts, where Metro West was selected through a competitive RFP process to demolish a vacant town-owned police station and create 40 units of 100% affordable family rental housing, where we expect to complete construction in early 2025. And the West Newton Armory, which was also a competitive RFP process for town-owned land, where we are creating 43 units of intergenerational housing. The Armory is permitted and funded, and we're planning to close and start construction in early 2025. As you can see, each of these projects uses a complex mix of state, federal, local, and private funding, targets deep levels of affordability at 60% AMI and below, and achieve ambitious sustainability goals, including Passive House certification and design certification. Okay, before I pass it to Sharon, I'm going to cover one more topic, diversity and inclusion. So ensuring representation on our board of both people of color and low-income individuals is central to our mission. Our current board is made up of 45% members of color, and our bylaws require that at least 1/3 of board members are low-income members of the communities we serve. When it comes to housing production, we approach diversity and inclusion in a number of ways. We set construction goals, development goals for our non-construction related costs, and operations goals during the operating period of the communities we create. Our current team for Lowell Street includes a number of WBEs, Icon Architecture, RBLA Design, and Maloney Properties, and as we work to bring on additional team members, we'll be doing so with our diversity goals in mind.
Great. Thank you, Caitlin. Again, my name is Sharon Small, and I'm excited to present the details of our proposal to you. For a big overview, in a nutshell, we're proposing 43 units in 4 buildings, 1 apartment building, and 3 sets of townhomes with 2 and 3 bedroom townhomes. The buildings are 2 and 3 stories, and they have an architectural style that reflects the neighboring buildings and matches the neighborhood. The site plan thoughtfully locates the buildings with an eye towards conserving the wetlands buffer and significant trees, and thinking through the site's relationship to the surroundings. And the development will be highly sustainable. It will be fossil fuel free. At least the apartment building will be designed to Passive House standards. There will be electric vehicle charging. If feasible, we'll incorporate a solar PV array. And we'll bring attention to indoor air quality, to eliminating redless materials when feasible, and to looking at whether we can do an embodied carbon analysis and paying attention to that as well. So here's the site plan. You can see the 4 buildings here. And the reason we ended up with 4 buildings was because we wanted to balance the desire for multiple smaller buildings with the need for accessibility and an elevator, with the cost of doing multiple buildings, the need for open space, and for parking across the site. So you can see the larger community lodge building at the plan south, or the southern part of the site. We've put it at the southern part of the site because that's where the grade difference is biggest between the site and the grade at Lowell Street, which will counteract the height of the building. And you can see the sets of townhomes in the middle of the site, which will be most visible from Lowell Street and is in the center of the site. This site plan preserves the wetlands buffer area where we won't be putting any structures. It also preserves the existing stone wall, which is a nice amenity, and the large existing tree next to the stone wall. We'll also be preserving the existing trees around the property line wherever feasible, and any replacement trees and any plantings will be native. And all of the site lighting will be dark sky compliant. We put the main site entrance with 2-way traffic as far from the intersection of Lowell Street and North Street as possible to minimize effects on that intersection. So that entrance is the main entrance to the site. And because Metro West is used to seeing towns ask for at least 2 exits, we've put a secondary exit more north of the site, which would be exit only and probably right turn only as well, to make sure we're meeting circulation needs. Our site plan has 55 parking spaces, which is enough for 1 space per unit, as well as 12 visitor spaces. And it has infrastructure for alternate transit modes, including a bus stop in the center of the site, internal pedestrian walking paths so that pedestrians can access the existing crosswalk at the intersection, which will be accessible, and bicycle parking sheds for 66 bikes on site. The development team also is proposing to raise the elevation of the developments by 5 feet to make sure that we have enough room for stormwater infiltration infrastructure so that we can have that underground infiltration infrastructure to recharge stormwater on site to eliminate to the neighbors. Here you can see a rendering. This is a view looking at the middle of the townhomes. You can see the views, which are is the open space in the middle of the townhomes, in addition to the open space at the north section of the site. And then in the background, you can see the community lodge building. Here's an elevation of the community lodge building. The building will have fiber cement horizontal clapboard siding and an asphalt shingle roof with trim, gables, and roof forms that will break up the building and reflect the neighboring architecture. Here you can see elevations of the townhomes. The townhomes will have vertical fiber cement board and batten siding with asphalt roof shingles to reflect the fact that the townhomes are kind of individual forms. And they'll have trim, varied roof lines, and dormers to add interest and also break up that building massing. Our proposal is for 43 total units at 30 to 60% of area median income. And we're including 43 units because that's necessary for our proposal to be financially feasible. We really need all of those 43 units to bring in enough rental income and to decrease per unit operating costs enough to have a financially feasible property that will have good long-term financial health, be able to be well maintained and kept in good repair. We're also proposing units at 30%, 50%, and 60% of AMI, not any 80% units. That's because we see the greatest need for units in our area as at low and extremely low incomes, and that need typically isn't met by mixed income, more typical 40B units. And it's also because it works with the proposed financing that we're planning to use. And the units at 30% and 50% of AMI will have project-based vouchers or operating subsidy to support those units. The development will have 24 two-bedroom units and 5 three-bedroom units, which you can see, which is per EOHLC requirements for bedrooms, and will have a range of accessibility levels with some units fully accessible and a few units proposed through the community-based housing program, which has even additional accessibility features beyond code, like extra room in the units and things like that. We're proposing the use of multiple funding sources, all of which we've used on recent Metro West projects, including federal, state, and local subsidy and debt and equity. And we're asking for $2 million from the Lexington Affordable Housing Trust Fund. We recognize that our ask from the Lexington Affordable Housing Trust is a significant ask, and it's based on what we consider to be a realistic and thoughtful approach to what the cost of the development really is. And it's also based on what we think is a proposed state financing package that can be awarded easily and quickly. And even though it is a significant ask from the town of Lexington, it will leverage the $25 million in funds, which make up the rest of the budget and come from outside sources. So the implementation plan for our proposal lays out a realistic schedule, which is driven by EOHLC funding timelines. EOHLC typically accepts first-time funding applications in their yearly January rounds, and those applications in the January round have to have received permit approval. And because it would be impossible to have this project receive a permit by January of 2025, our implementation plan assumes that we would wait and submit a pre-application for the project in 2025 and a full application in January of 2026. So that's what's driving our schedule, and it's based on what EOHLC requires. And that timeline will let us have enough time to have a robust community engagement process. That would include having to meet the developer open house soon after being designated as the developer. We would hold multiple community meetings in person and virtually before permitting began. And we'd also do individual outreach to direct abutters, so we could talk one-on-one, give them an opportunity to talk one-on-one. And we would hold office hours in the town so that folks could come up to us, ask questions, get to know about the development. We'd also establish a general email so people know where to go to give input and ask questions. And we would set up a website for the property so people could get updates, get the information, and learn about the project. Once the project was done, we would work with our third-party property manager, Maloney Properties. They have a very large portfolio of similar affordable housing projects, and they also manage the majority of Metro West's existing portfolio. So they have experience with all of the funding programs that we're proposing. And we'd work with them to come up with a property management plan to address rent up, tenant selection, monitoring, maintenance, and also resident services, which we think is an important piece to making sure it's a successful community and the residents are successful.
Okay, and just quickly in conclusion, why Metro West CD? Because we are a mission-driven, committed, long-term partner with local ties, and we believe we have a thoughtful and realistic proposal. We would be thrilled to be partnered with the town of Lexington to create high-quality, affordable housing on Lowell Street, and would be honored to partner with the town on this important effort. So thank you very much for inviting us to speak with you today, and we welcome any questions that you have.
Okay, thank you very much. So for the question portion, what we will be doing is, as I said, we have at least 8 questions for 30 minutes. And I'll start and we'll run down the line with questions for you. And you said first names would be okay, right? Caitlin? Okay, great, thanks. So, very first question is, and you've already discussed this just right now, but sort of, I don't know if you can talk about it a little more, but please elaborate on your success in community engagement plans for the project, and what have you learned from the community engagement that didn't go as planned from other projects that you might have done?
Do you want to take that question?
Sure. Okay, so Sharon outlined many of the steps that we would take in a community engagement effort here in Lexington. It's a process that we've gone through in other communities. We've been very lucky to have a lot of support around our recent proposals. So a really important part of that work would be working with the Affordable Housing Trust because of the local connections and the long history of working in town. Maybe do you want to pull up the CE plan? Okay. I can maybe tell a story about a project in Metro West's history that didn't move forward, that points to some of the challenges in this work, and then point to a more recent project where we overcame those challenges. So in Newton, Metro West City proposed 8 units of affordable housing to support individuals transitioning out of homelessness in Newton at a former fire station. As part of the response to that effort, there was a lot of pushback from the community, and unfortunately, the project ultimately did not move forward. So that was about 8 or 10 years ago. At that time, local advocacy organization was established called Engine 6, which you may have heard of. It's become a great example of local housing advocacy in the state of Massachusetts. And then when we moved into the permitting process for our West Newton Armory project, we had a number of advocates who were really supportive of affordable housing locally, a very supportive mayor. We were able to have a very productive community engagement process, very thoughtful approach to our comprehensive permit application, where we provided a lot of detail. We were able to really answer the questions, make sure that people had the information they need to think about a proposal. Ultimately, we were able to gather a lot of support for the project, and we were able to move through the comprehensive permit process in just a couple of hearings. So we were really proud of that effort at Newton. Anything you'd like to add on community engagement?
Sure. I think another aspect of our community engagement approach is to have the right forum for the right kind of interaction. And so one thing we've put thought into is making sure we have a lot of different venues for people to talk to us, and really stressing, an open house is a great way to introduce the project. It's more informal. It gives people a chance to talk to us one-on-one, to talk to the development team one-on-one. Bigger meetings are a great venue to kind of present the information, some of the information when you start permitting. And that individual outreach, especially for direct abutters, is important because those folks are the ones who are most directly impacted, and it really gives them an opportunity to be heard and to talk to us directly.
Okay, thanks. Any follow-ups? All right, Tiffany.
Yes, so the RFP sets forth a preference for approximately 40 units. Why did you choose the number of units you are proposing?
So I may be repeating myself a little bit from the presentation, but when we did the math on the costs of the project, we found that 43 units was an important number for us to hit to make the operating costs of the project and the upfront costs of the project work with the requirement to build multiple buildings and to put in some of the infrastructure in the site, like stormwater infrastructure, and raising the site like IV. And those additional 3 units don't seem like much, but they're really important because every development cost is spread over all of the apartments or the townhomes in the project. And so adding those, for example, adding those 3 additional units doesn't change the cost of maintaining 1 elevator for every year, but it spreads out the cost over additional 3 apartments. And so it really does impact the operating costs, brings in more rental income, it decreases some of the development costs per unit. And so we found that it just was important for us to make a project that we thought would be financially feasible.
And I'll just emphasize the high quality maintenance aspect of this. We understand, it's a very high priority for Metro West Collaborative Development to have well maintained properties over the long term. And we understand that that was a high priority for the town of Lexington as well, making sure that it fits in with the character of the community and is something that we can all be proud of.
Okay, I could just remind everybody to speak louder because I think
Sorry.
acoustics in the room are not perfect, but so we need to talk louder. Okay, any follow-ups on that? Next, Mark, please.
Sure. So we're wondering about your project team's bandwidth and your timeline for moving forward, and we're kind of interested if you could comment about how many other projects you have in the pipeline right now, you're working on right now, and how that all fits together with this project.
Sure. So this particular RFP comes along at a very good time for Metro West. We walked through some of our pipeline projects. We talked about how a couple we just completed Glenbrook Way. Hudson is planning to be completed early next year, and we're going to start construction on the Armory. And we are really looking for our next EOHLC funding application. So, as Sharon kind of talked about, we put forward what we think is a realistic timeline based on EOHLC priorities for our application to EOHLC. That also allows us to go through a robust and meaningful community engagement process. And we have, great capacity and great team to be able to move forward on that timeline. Sharon, is there anything you want to add about our pipeline or team?
Sure, I guess I would say we have one other project in the pipeline right now in Natick, 5 Auburn Street. So this would be our second project kind of in the pipeline without a funding award. So we would only kind of have 2 projects early on, and we have plenty of staff and capacity to manage that.
Okay, Bill.
Okay. So my question regards the land disposition agreement. I know everybody that submitted had comments on the land distribution agreement. And the question is, if, it's totally hypothetical, but if the town was to not agree to any changes to the land disposition agreement, what sort of impact would that have on your, proposal?
We'd probably have to think about it, but it would be very, very challenging to comply with the initial terms of the land disposition agreement. We did submit a full set of comments, and I think the biggest overall comment we had on the land disposition agreement was about the timeline, because the land disposition agreement has timelines in there, and I believe they're looking for financial and construction closing on the project within 9 months, and that just wouldn't be possible because of the OHLC funding application round. Because you often need to submit, you can submit once a year, and you often need to submit twice, occasionally more, to receive funding from the OHLC. So the timeline in the land disposition agreement just, we couldn't meet it. So off the bat, that's the biggest one. And, I'd have to go back and talk to our attorney to see if there were any other ones that we felt as strongly about, but we'd be pretty concerned if there weren't any changes made.
Okay. Linda?
So I'm wondering what kind of challenges you might see in this particular project, and that's going through architecture, landscape architecture, engineering, development, sort of what, thinking about this particular thing, writing the proposal, what were some of the considerations, what were some of the challenges that you faced?
Sure. I think laying out the site and getting everything to fit just right was something we thought and talked a lot about as a team, making sure the grading, the stormwater, the open space kind of fit together. And I think there may be still some challenges in grading and stormwater that we think we figured out, but we'll need to keep looking at as we go through design development. I don't know if the design team wants to chime in.
Yeah, you mentioned the circulation loop that we felt was important. Lowell Street is very much a directional, and I think recognizing that there's going to be a new family community here, people will be wanting to come off and pull on, and where are they coming and going to? Is it always by car or would it be by bike, right? So we were really thinking about, like, how do we connect to a larger network that doesn't yet exist, and at a minimum, how do we provide a sense of continuity on the site? So the bus stop was an important piece, to sort of access on and back out, so you're not, which may or may not be appropriate. We got some traffic kind of preliminary thoughts just to test that, but it's a busy intersection. We want to have a proper distance from it, and there'll be traffic coming and going from the site that I don't think needs to be disruptive, but thinking about that pattern is important.
And I think we worked together a lot to strategize balancing all of the components that were within the RFP, from the multiple buildings to preserving as many trees as possible, the wetland buffers, the really significant tree and stone wall, kind of taking those factors in. And, we kind of went in circles. We had a lot of conversations with the whole team of, are multiple buildings the right fit? Should we just do one giant building? And trying to make all of that work, and considering separation to groundwater and all of the stormwater and wetland impacts and protections. So I think, there are a lot of details that once we get into it, like the solar, if appropriate, like how do we balance solar while maintaining all the trees? And so I think there are a lot of those little details that we'll really want to dive into that will require all of us to work together, which luckily we're really good at doing and do often, so.
Thank you.
Okay. So I guess I'm next. I was like, wait a second. All right. Does your pre-development funding give you flexibility to respond to changes? And what we mean is changes that will come up during the comp permit or whatever, as you're talking with the neighbors and the butters, and as you're talking with the wider Lexington community. Do you have enough pre-development funding that you feel comfortable proceeding?
Yes, definitely. On projects like this, we often use pre-development from an array of sources. And often we do end up asking the local affordable housing trust if they're comfortable providing some funding during pre-development, because that gives us funding without interest, and it also shows the trust support for the project. But with or without that, we also work with the Life Initiative. We have an existing line of credit with them that we have a lot of flexibility around. We can use it for different projects. We can use it to pay funds and then get reimbursed. And we also often work with CDAC to get pre-development loans for projects. So we feel like we have an array of different pre-development funding options, and we'll have the pre-development funding available to move the project forward and do what we have to do.
And I will add, there's always uncertainty during pre-development, so that's part of what we plan for. And our lenders, our pre-development lenders are very, used to that. Every project is unique, and as much as we try to manage challenges, there are often unforeseen circumstances and we have to adjust. So we've got great funding partners, and our team is ready to address those challenges.
Okay, thank you.
So describe a project where you face a particular challenge And how did you respond?
You want that budget one? So, I mean, maybe I'll just throw it up again on the screen here. So one challenge that we faced on a recent project was with the West Newton Armory. At the West Newton Armory, we're using 4% low-income housing tax credits, which is another of the two choices for low-income housing tax credits. You have 9% and 4%. And 4% low-income housing tax credits require the developer to use special tax-exempt bonds, which are awarded from a separate agency different from EOHLC, although they work together. And so on the West Newton Armory, we were very lucky. It was an unusual circumstance, and we actually received a funding award from EOHLC after one application. So we were thrilled. We received a funding award in 2023. We started getting ready to start construction on the project in 2024. And we were told we would have tax-exempt bonds for the project in 2024. And then it started getting closer to 2024, and we learned actually we didn't have tax-exempt bonds in 2024. So we were facing a challenge with the project. It was actually still on schedule from the original schedule because we'd gotten an early funding award, but it was now behind what we thought it would be. We didn't know where we were going to get our tax-exempt bonds. We were worried about facing increasing construction costs because of escalation. And so we were able to work with the state agencies, and we had originally planned to work with one agency for tax-exempt bonds. We were able to switch and work with a second and get a commitment from them that we would receive 2025 tax-exempt bonds. So we switched, and we'll be starting construction as soon as we can in 2025, but we have that kind of unofficial commitment from them. We received some additional funding from the state and from the West Metro Home Consortium that would address any gaps and any increases in construction costs. And we're now back on track to start construction early in 2025, and actually still on the original schedule because we got that early funding award, but we were able to pivot and navigate that potential or that delay and line up more funding to offset the cost increases we expected.
Go off script. Can I ask one question?
Do you want to follow up, Bill?
Well, it's not really related to that question. You are going to raise the site 5 feet. And I'm wondering on the back end how that's handled. Is that, because the site's has the burn, the slope up to the street, but then really it's a flat site. So the back end of that, is there retaining walls? Do you gradually meet the existing grade, or just conceptually? I know it's early, so.
Yep, so the reason we're talking about raising the site is the depth to groundwater, so we can provide the stormwater without impacting as much of the wetland buffer itself. So putting the stormwater underneath the parking, it condenses the site because we're told the wetland buffer, the riverfront buffer really wants to be protected during the RFP process and during the site walk. It also provides us the depth that we need to provide a gravity sewer connection. So we're thinking through all of these pieces. On the backside, as you talk about, we may need to do walls. And because we're keeping this close, walls may need to be required at the edge so that we can keep our footprint smaller, less impact. It's not ideal, but it is, again, if we want to keep that buffer as it is, we do need to provide something at the edge to create that that elevation difference.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. So we wanted to thank you for, we asked you a bunch of written questions. We want to thank you for your written responses. But as we all know, when you put things in writing, it may not provide the nuance that you want, or we thought you might want to elaborate on some answers that you provided to the written questions. So this is just an opportunity, if there's anything you wanted to elaborate on from the written questions we asked you.
I'm going to look back at them in
Yes,
just a moment.
Looking over. I don't. Nothing really jumps out at me. David, anything?
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I will just say, I think on the question around, our team proposals, recent projects, initial schedule versus budget, and actual completion dates and final cost. You were asking a little bit about our capacity earlier, and I think we're really proud to say that we've had, a number of pipeline projects during one of the most challenging periods in recent history. And despite those really kind of macro external challenges, we have still been able to move our projects forward, with some schedule implications, some budget implications, but we've been really proud to have been able to really minimize the impact on the local contribution task that we've made of the cities and towns that we've partnered with. So just wanted to highlight that piece of it. Yeah, Sean, anything to add to that?
Okay,
Okay.
that's a perfectly acceptable answer.
All right, so, do you guys want to say any, final words before we wrap up the interview? Does anybody have any other follow-up questions? No?
I don't think so. I think we've said this in the presentation because we weren't sure we would have this opportunity, but I'll just say again, Metro West CD has had a long history of working locally in Lexington. We are thrilled to see the progress in town around the Affordable Housing Trust and making a site available for affordable housing. We believe that we are the best partner you could find. I think I would encourage all of you to really think about the people that you really want to work with, shoulder to shoulder for the next 4 years, because it will take that much time and we'll be doing a lot of talking, a lot of working together. But we really are deeply committed to the mission of providing affordable housing. We know we can execute and build high quality housing in town. And we are a long-term committed partner to the future of the property. So we're really grateful to have the opportunity to speak with you today.
Okay, well, I want to thank you again for coming in, putting all the work into your proposal. It was clearly a lot of work, very well thought out. So we really appreciate all the effort that you put into it. We will be in contact with you about site visits very shortly after everything finishes today.
Yep.
So thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks.
So, first of all, thank you so much for coming in today for the interviews. I want to remind everybody here that the purpose of the meeting today, the interviews, is for the Affordable Housing Trust to conduct interviews and for the Affordable Housing Trust to ask questions. There will be no public comment or questions, but please feel free to email any comments you may have afterwards to the Affordable Housing Trust at affordablehousingtrust@lexingtonma.gov, and we will take them into consideration as we make our recommendation to the Select Board. So thank you. I want to also thank you guys for answering all our questions last week on such an abbreviated schedule. It was very helpful to us, and everybody did great. And we also want to thank you for all your hard work that went into your proposal. We know, we can see and tell that there was a lot of thought put into it, and we really appreciate all that you've put into it. So first of all, if you could, we're going to introduce ourselves. I've forgotten already. I'm Elaine Tung, and
Tiffany Payne.
thank you.
Mark Sandy.
I'm Bill Erickson.
Linda Prosser.
Carol Kowalski, Assistant Town Manager for Development.
And we have Raghi Ramachandran, who you've already met, who's our administrative assistant on the Lexington, on the housing.
Land use housing and
Thank you.
development.
I'm really getting loopy at this point.
Lots of words.
Okay, you're the last, but certainly not the least. So, first of all, if you could introduce yourselves and anybody who's on your team that will be working with you on this development, and also how you would like to be addressed. First names, your formal name, that would be great. And just as a preview, we will start with your presentation first, and then we will have approximately 30 minutes for questions. We have at least 8 questions for you, so if you could plan your responses to fit within that time frame, that would be great.
Great.
So thank you.
I'm going to introduce the team, and then each one of them is going to speak at some point along the way, if that's okay with you. Right. Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for inviting us here today. I hear we're the last ones, so I know everyone wants to get to dinner, so we'll roll through this as quickly as we can. I am Julie Kramer, and I work for Preservation of Affordable Housing, or POA, as we're sometimes known. I'd like to first applaud the town for the amazing work you've done already to expand housing opportunities in your town. Your Lexington Next comprehensive plan is just amazing, so congratulations on that. We know you've had a robust response to this RFP, which is wonderful. You have a lot of great options in front of you, and that's always a plus. Before I talk about our design work that we did for the site, I'd like to talk briefly about our amazing team that we assembled and a little bit about what we feel differentiates POA from some of the other developers that you'll be considering. I'll start with, to my left, Charlie Durack. Oh yeah, sorry.
We got pretty pictures.
Here's our picture.
I just got to see what I was driving for a moment.
So Charlie is one of POA's most experienced project managers, and he lives in nearby Bedford, which is always a plus. He has recently finished work on POA's all-electric passive house project in Boston called the Kenzie, and you may have read about that in the materials we provided. Next to Charlie is Jeremy Lake. Jeremy is with Union Studio, which is our architect on the project. Jeremy's most recent experience with POA is a Friendly 40B project in Brewster that was just awarded funding, so we're excited to get that moving. And then Lisa Giersbach, who some of you may know, she's a Lexington resident, and she is working with POA on a very exciting project in Boston, which includes a library and then housing on top of a library, which is just fantastic. She has already provided such important local input on our design, so we thank her for that. Some of the other members of our team include Roger Brown, who in the center, who leads our development group at POA. Deanna Savage, and Julie Klump, who both work with our general contractors and on the passive house design of our projects. So they help to ensure that our general contractors have opportunities for a diverse workforce at our construction sites. We also have Jen Cavaco on the bottom left. Jen leads our New England POA Communities team. POA Communities is our management group at POA, and she has been instrumental in all of the lease-up work on our new communities. And then John Ford is with Horsley Witten, last but not least. He is our trusted civil engineer on the project. Each of our team members have really committed and talented staff and lots of housing experience in communities similar to Lexington. So that's what brought us all together. POA has developed 12 newly constructed communities in Massachusetts, and we currently have 5 in process through the development process. We have successfully permitted 10 friendly 40Bs, which is a lot for one organization. I think what you would hear from the stakeholders in those communities is that POA is not just a developer or a committed team member for the town. We are a neighbor.
We focus heavily on bringing the best in class work to our communities in which we work. And, you know, with that said, I'd like to tell you that what we are presenting today is a well-informed and really strong starting point. And we look forward to an engaged process with the public, with members of the trust and the town and neighbors in precinct 5 and 6 who are mostly impacted by this development. So with that, I'll turn it over to Charlie to talk a little bit more about POA, our work and our successes.
Great. Thank you, Julie. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to say a few words about sustainability, which is one of our core values that we consider greatly when we take on any new project. And so we really appreciate when cities and towns such as yourself share that vision and that passion for sustainable development. And so that is just one of the reasons that we think that this is such an important opportunity. We would be leveraging what we believe is a differentiating strength of POA as an organization, while also partnering with a forward-thinking municipality to deliver really critical affordable housing in a vibrant community. And so I would say that POA has substantial experience building within the passive house design program, which folks may have heard of quite a bit recently. We have 5 passive house communities in our active portfolio, with a number of others either in construction or in our development pipeline. I will say that there's also a bit of a learning curve when it comes to designing a passive house building. So POA is very fortunate to have in-house expertise across several key disciplines that are relative to passive house design and construction, from architectural design to building performance, construction management, and implementation of passive house work itself. And you know, we really understand and appreciate the town's commitment to build not only sustainable but resilient, affordable housing, and that is very much in line with what POA does on a day-to-day basis. On this slide, we have 2 pictures on the top. Both are passive house projects that POA has recently completed. We have LeClaire Village in Mashpee, which is at sort of a similar scale to what we'd be proposing here in Lexington. And then at the bottom is the Kenzie, which Julie mentioned just a moment ago, the city of Boston's first all-electric, fossil fuel independent mid-rise building. So we're very excited and proud of that one. So happy to talk more with folks shortly about that sustainability work. Another priority of the town that I think we share in common, POA has this as really a corporate value, is a commitment to development that creates opportunity for people of color and minority-owned businesses. POA has a diverse staff, not only at the corporate level, also its board of directors. POA Communities, our affiliate management company as well. It's something that we take very seriously. In 2023, POA was certified as a minority nonprofit organization in the Commonwealth. And what we have here on this slide is actually a look at our work at the deal level on our minority MBE and WBE, or minority and women business entities. And so you can see, I think, you know, there's a lot of stats. I won't read through them, but I think that our body of work really speaks for itself. It's something that we take very seriously. We implement a hiring plan and a program with our general contracting partners before any shovel hits the ground on any project that we do. So it's something that we're very committed to. And finally, just a word about POA's nonprofit mission. You know, we are a nonprofit developer, which I think creates opportunities for us in the developments that we complete. It allows us access to special resources like capital magnet funds. It grants us access into set-asides for nonprofit developers within the state's affordable housing programs, which are extremely competitive and extremely valuable. Money that would otherwise be dispersed to shareholders or partners in a for-profit organization instead gets reinvested into our residents and into our properties. For example, in the past 5 years, POA has reinvested about 88% of its corporate earnings into programs that benefit our residents and our properties. So things like resident services, which we call community impact, direct capital improvements back into the portfolio to ensure the long-term health and viability of the real estate that we own. So it's a critical part of our mission and the work that we do as longtime stewards of affordable housing. We are not developing real estate to flip it and make a profit. We are there to enter communities and become long-term stakeholders to continue the work that we do to advance affordable housing and housing opportunity generally. So with that, I will turn it over to Jeremy, who's going to talk through the project design.
Thanks, Charlie. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Jeremy Lake with Union Studio. I'm a principal there. We are based in Providence. We also have an office in Philadelphia, but we do work all over Massachusetts. We've worked on a number of 40Bs, doing a lot of work out on the Cape these days, a lot of similar challenges and opportunities to what we see here with this site. So we're really excited to be involved here. Affordable housing is about a third of our portfolio, so we do work on a wide range of projects, but this is the kind of project that we particularly love. It really speaks to our mission and our values, so we're really excited to be a part of the team here. We wanted to just outline a few just sort of general principles. These really inform any project we work on, but we think are particularly applicable to the site here on Lowell Street. First of all, we're always seeking a balance of contextual design, which is to say buildings that we feel like are appropriate and fit in, or the right scale, the right level of detail, but also recognizing there are issues we need to solve for, things like constructability, cost containment. You got to be very careful of what you're doing with the budget in an affordable housing project. You can't just sort of tack higher value onto the end price just to make up for some things you've done along the way that you could have done better. And certainly energy efficiency, as Charlie pointed out, is a big factor we always consider. With these sorts of projects, it's also really important to understand how the financing works around those projects. What is it that the agencies that are giving you the money expect to see with these kinds of projects? So we've learned how to kind of fine tune these things, kind of get every last drip of juice out of the orange, right, with what we're allowed to do and how we're able to do it. So we're excited to bring that to bear here as well. When working on the site plan, again, this is just our first cut concept, right? But when we were looking at it, we tried to take into consideration where the adjacent neighbors are, what the sort of nature of those uses were, how the sort of natural areas exist on the site, where the existing canopy is, and really the local patterns as well. I'll speak to that in a minute, but how we sited the buildings, we were trying to be respectful of how the existing buildings along Lowell Street were currently sited. And we also, I think Julie mentioned, this is just a sort of first step, but we look forward to a lot of collaboration moving forward with both the town of Lexington and the local neighbors. We expect this design to evolve. We would hope this design would evolve. So please don't take this as, we feel like we're good to go and we're finished here. We know this is just the beginning of a process. So thank you. So this is the conceptual site layout that we proposed. 34 total units. The majority of them are 2-bedroom, 18 of those. 12 are 1-bedrooms, and then we do have 4 3-bedrooms. The 3-bedrooms are in a townhouse format. Those are the ones tucked in the lower right-hand corner, whereas the rest of the units, the 1s and 2s, are in what we call stacked flats. We'll show you an example of that building in a little bit. But we find these structures are a nice way of providing sort of the density that we need to make this deal work, to maximize the amount of affordable housing we're providing, but in structures that we think are of an appropriate scale to what is really largely a single-family community, right? Right around here is almost entirely single-family detached. So again, that's one of those balance points we were looking for. You'll see at least at the front, we tried to line the first few buildings along Lowell Street, set about 50, 60 feet back. Again, consistent with what we see in a lot of the existing buildings out there. Right across the street there aren't homes, but it's a little cropped out. If you keep going down Lowell Street, that's kind of the pattern you'd expect to see with the single families homes that are out there currently. And actually even that commercial building that's on the corner of North Street there, cropped up a little bit there at the top of the page. And again, part of the point here was to put what are the sort of more multifamily types towards the commercial end of the site and really taper down to the townhouses as you're getting adjacent to the single family homes. We had to figure out what we were going to do with the parking. One strategy we thought was put it in back so that most folks driving by the site don't have to necessarily see a parking lot, but we did it in a way that we think is pretty efficient, and really tried to think about all the other spaces in between as sort of maximizing opportunities for community spaces, open spaces that the residents can gather and play. We want to have a play area. We're going to have a little management community building, taking advantage of the areas where we're trying to be respectful of the wetland setbacks to maybe have some trails. So really also trying to maximize where the community amenities might be for the residents here. Next slide, thank you. And actually I'll let Lisa speak to some of the other site features and landscape elements.
I'm Lisa Giersbach, landscape architect on the project. It's actually been really exciting working with the team on sort of developing this conceptual diagram to this point, in that we as Jeremy was saying, are really taking our cues from what's existing there. We respect that there is it's a wooded site. While it may not be a pristine woodland, there are real benefits to having this natural environment and trying to keep that within a new development. And so what we're looking at with the houses is, how we can situate these homes sort of within a landscape and actually take our cues from the woodland that exists around it. So we have the wetland beyond, the trees along Lowell Street, and really trying to bring those into the site to make it feel like it's a kind of wonderful canopied site. Our approach to housing is always thinking about the outdoor spaces as part of how we live on a site, right? As extensions of the home. And so, we're looking at areas for play that are playful spaces, places for gathering, as well as places for recreation. And I have to say, as a Lexington resident, I'm really proud of our trail system here with the Across Lexington network. Just down North Street, we have the North Pitts trails. We can go down to the Vinebrook trails, and everything kind of leads back to town. And it's this incredible network that, ideally we'd love to in some way connect to. There are spaces on the site in the existing wetlands that we're not going to be able to develop, but could be cleaned up, could be mitigated, and could afford a wonderful trail system. Lastly, I think overall we want to create a very sustainable landscape. We're looking at best practices for stormwater on site. Can we collect water within rain gardens? Look at permeable paving to try and reduce our footprint so that we're not just building more and more impermeable space. And I think with those, we look at those as amenities, right? Rain gardens can be beautiful, they can be educational, and really start to knit these homes sort of within the larger landscape. And I think in a lot of ways really kind of make this a showcase for the town itself as a sustainable, productive landscape. Next slide. And this is just an aerial view, kind of, again, very conceptual, but kind of overlooking the site. And what we're trying to do, again, I think, is to try and pull the canopy of the adjacent parcels, the wetland area, as well as along Lowell Street, and to bring those trees into the site and make these houses feel really nestled in there. Hand it back to you.
Great.
Jeremy.
Yeah, so before we transition to looking at the architecture, if you can go back just for a second. Again, just previewing the buildings sort of lined along Lowell Street. They do start to peel back at the upper left-hand corner, in part because there's a lot of topography there. One thing we're also trying to be mindful of is not sort of carving out, huge areas, trying to work within the existing site grades. For better or worse, the site does sit kind of a few feet below Lowell Street. I think that's of benefit because we are proposing structures that are as much as 3 stories in scale. So the fact that they're down a little bit is actually beneficial for helping mitigate some of those concerns that we imagine will come up. But again, you can see here, we just wanted to kind of represent the scale of some of those shared amenity spaces, the scale of those buildings. You can see how we're trying to break down what might otherwise feel like a building that's too big into smaller pieces so that, again, hopefully as you're just driving by on Lowell Street, you don't really necessarily think about the fact that those are actually little multifamily buildings, not single family homes. That's what we're trying to do, right? We're trying to find that middle ground. So if you want to go to the next slide. As we were trying to consider maybe what the architectural character of this might be, we know that Lexington is a community that really prides itself on its sort of colonial history, everything since colonial times. And certainly we're not proposing to build a bunch of colonial homes out here, but we did start looking at some of the precedents. Some of these are in Lexington, others are in surrounding communities. But there's some cues here that we thought were actually very applicable to a project that is building affordable housing. One, very simple forms, simple masses, that helps with constructability and cost. That sort of very regular rhythm of single windows is something that we think we could really incorporate and pull in, that we think is just very respectful of the existing context and things that we see around here. And even the way these were sort of treated from a color perspective, the middle image in the bottom is an outlier with the sort of the white trim that we do on a lot of our projects. But really, in colonial times, they weren't so fussy. It was a red house. You painted it red, right? Part of it was hard to come by paint, so you used what you had. There's all these little sort of efficiencies built into there that are actually quite charming and wonderful. So again, this was just sort of a launching point. We weren't going to replicate 9/9 window patterns, but just there were cues here that we thought we could pick up on that we would hope would make the new construction feel like it fit into this community. So with that, next slide. These are just some of the examples of the elevations that we've proposed. So the upper elevation is those are the 3-story stacked flats building. You can see because a lot of the existing context is 2 stories, although I did see a lot, I was driving around again today and saw a lot of 2.5-story homes. It's not a foreign thing here, right? It's not like all the homes are ranch homes in Lexington. You do have a lot of homes that are 2.5 stories. So even though they are 3-story structures, we tried to really make them read as if it was a 2-story structure that had a half story above that, intentionally treating that upper story kind of with colors that are similar to the roof. So hoping it would recede a little bit, and you really pick up on the 2-story portion of the building. And on the lower right, those are some of the townhomes again, which are 2 stories. But again, keep it simple, keep it humble. I think the kids now say very demure. You know, the intent here is to really make this feel like it's not trying too hard. It's really just trying to plug in, right? We're not trying to stand out. We're trying to integrate ourselves into an existing community. So just briefly with the types of units then, on the upper left are an example of the 1 and 2 bedroom apartments that are in the stacked flats. So this is sort of half of one of those 12-unit buildings, although we also do have one that is just a 6-unit building like it's shown here. That common entry feeds off onto a unit on either side. On the left is a single floor, single level living 2-bedroom unit. On the right is a 1-bedroom unit. Those would stack. So on the 2nd floor, you'd find the same thing. On the 3rd floor, you'd find the same thing. Works out really well. The ground floor units can be accessible. So we have a handful of accessible units, certainly visitable. I know there were questions about universal design. This really tees up nicely when you're kind of, your base unit is intended to be an accessible unit, and then you're sort of repeating that pattern on the upper floors. You're sort of building in some of those clearances and things that do start to think about and address universal design concerns. And then on the lower right is an example of the 3-bedroom townhouses. Again, a pretty straightforward living, dining, kitchen on the 1st floor with a half bath, and then upstairs the 3 bedrooms with a full bath. So with that, I'll pass it back to Julie.
Great. Well, thanks. I'm going to wrap it up with some pie charts. Everyone loves pie charts, right? This is really meant to inform our financing plan for the project. The top 4 are our recent funded and most built projects, small scale, you know, all 3 and 46 unit projects. They are really what they represent is the different what's called the capital stack, right? The different sources used to build affordable housing. So each one of the colors represents a different source, a different funding source. And what these don't start out looking exactly this way, but as we continue to look at the funding landscape and the resources available for this type of housing, we make adjustments. So the pie chart on the bottom is where parcel 6844 sits today. And we are using income averaging in an effort to broaden the income diversity at the property. So we have 30% AMI units, area mean income, up to 80% AMI units. And we feel that that's important in meeting the town's goal for workforce housing. What I would also like to point out is that, those 4 top pie charts, we've done 1 project every year. And that is because we have the experience and expertise and creativity to get these projects done, to get them funded, to get them done in a meaningful way with the town's support and buy-in. It's important that we remain responsive and flexible and creative. Because the funding rounds are a very very timed effort, right? And we have the staff, we have the pre-development funds to keep projects moving, and that's important because you can't have a project at a resting state, right? You've got to keep it moving and get others on board and supporting your project. So. With that, I think the next slide is just some of our more recent projects. Most of them are on the Cape. The one on the upper left is really a precedent from Union Studio, from their portfolio. We just love it. We think it's fantastic. And we will move to the final slide, which is just to say thank you. We appreciate your time today, and we are ready to answer questions you might have.
Okay, well, thank you very much for all of that. As I said, we have a bunch of questions, so I'm going to start and then we're just going to head right on down the line. So, first of all, is first names okay, or do you want to?
Yes.
Great, okay. And you might have said that and I missed it, so I apologize. So, and first names here are okay too. So, first of all, the question. Could you elaborate on your team's success in community engagement, plans for this project, and what have you learned from community engagements that didn't go as planned, if any?
That's a great question. I'm gonna pass it
Sure.
to Charlie to start, and we can all sort of fill in.
Yeah, I would say a really powerful example of some positive things that we've done in recent community engagement efforts, our Willow Park project in Watertown and residences at Laurel Hill. Is that Bourne?
No, that's Wellfleet.
Wellfleet, excuse me. The development staff working on those projects literally went door to door to abutters and folks within the neighborhood and the community to introduce themselves, to introduce the plan for the project, what we were proposing. I think that was really well received. For me, and I think others at POA, what's really critical is that folks in the community have an opportunity to have their voices be heard. And so community meetings, design charrettes, POA will come into a community and give neighbors and abutters an opportunity to sort of weigh in on the project and make sure that their voices are heard. And I think that that's really critical and something that's been successful for us in the past. And I think that we would probably plan to embark on a similar strategy here to make sure that folks have an opportunity to weigh in on the project itself. The second part of your question was maybe a challenge that we've encountered.
Yeah.
You want me to take a challenge?
Yeah.
I want to take a challenge.
I've got one, but yeah,
I've got some scars.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I would say I think the challenge in any community engagement process is that the community has multiple voices. So you have different desires, expectations, hopes from someone who lives immediately adjacent to the site than you do from folks who live in other parts of the community. So I think one of the important aspects of the community engagement piece is making sure all those voices come to bear. Because at the end of the day, you're asking a board or a council or someone to vote and approve on it. And it's important that they've heard that wide spectrum. And I think one of the challenges we've had is if only the very vocal people that live right next door, who rightly so are freaked out about the fact that what's currently a wooded lot is suddenly going to become 34 homes. If their voices get so magnified that the voices of the rest of the community that are saying we really need this affordable housing, we only have so many parcels to work on, this is a good parcel, the town's put this out there, in theory the town has agreed that this is a good parcel, there's a conversation there that needs to be had. And so I think that that's what we would hope to do through the community engagement process, is just make sure we're having the conversation, that we're helping folks wherever they land on that spectrum understand the underlying challenges, the underlying opportunities, the underlying financing, what it takes to make the deal get done. So hopefully at the end of the day, there's a little more comfort around it. But we've never been able to win everybody over. You don't on any issue in a town, right? That's the point. There's a plurality of voices. So I think that's a challenge that we know we will face, that we embrace, because it is an important part of that process.
If I could just add just very quickly, I think one of the important things too, at some point in the process for us, has always been to get everyone out on site. And so that you have a meeting with the community on site, adjacent to the site, somewhere, rather than just being in a boardroom or a hearing room. Because I think that understanding a lot of those site elements, when you're looking at something on the screen, it isn't as real as standing there and walking together, at a point where you really understand the scale of these houses and we can talk about it sort of on an existing site. That's really important.
Okay, thank you. Follow-ups?
Yes,
Tiffany?
I know you touched on this in the presentation, but the RFP sets forth a preference for approximately 40 units. Why did you choose the number of units that you're proposing?
That's a great question. And, Jeremy in Union Studio, we tossed this around a lot. And one of the things that kept coming up was another one of your recommendations, which was an elevator building. And POA, has built a lot of elevator buildings, and we absolutely see why you would have sort of made that recommendation. But as we were looking at the site and we did a lot of test fitting and a lot of like, where do these, buildings belong and at what size, at what scale, we really felt that the number of units we landed on was appropriate for the site. We always like more units, right? That's what we tried to do. But we just felt the site, really spoke to us and said, maybe you don't want an elevated building here, right? Maybe you want just a slightly smaller scale building. And so when we started doing this test fitting, 34 units made sense to us. It still allows for some 3-bedroom units. You have to do that through a 40B. We tried to get as many 2 bedrooms as we could, so we felt that we were still building community, family-focused units. And I don't know if you have anything else to add, Jeremy?
No, it's exactly the point that once you introduce an elevator, it pushes for pushing everything into one building because elevators are very expensive. So we did want to make sure we touched on that at some point, and Julie did that. The other thing I will say is one of the really unsexy side of what we do is figuring out the parking. So as you keep adding units, you keep adding parking. And one of the things we also realized early on was here was a really simple, efficient way of solving for the parking. And in a weird way, almost reverse engineering how many units that then supports. So that's, I spoke to balance. All these things are things where we go back and forth. Well, if we added 4 more units, A, where would they go? B, where would we park them? C, what does that do for the forms of the building? So to Julie's point, we tested even beyond 40, and we kind of ended up at about 34. We thought that felt pretty comfortable and seemed to balance the way the site wanted to balance.
And I just would, as an endpoint, say that we think the funding sources we're using work well with a 34-unit building. They would work well with a 40 as well, but it doesn't mean that it had to be 40 to fit the financing plan we have in place.
Okay, Mark.
Okay, so one of the next question we're kind of wondering about is your team's bandwidth and timeline for moving forward. And I know you kind of mentioned this in the presentation already, but could you talk a little bit about what other projects you have in the pipeline and what other projects you would be looking at doing at the same time as this project?
Sure. So we've been very fortunate, as those pie charts show, to really be able to get a project funded in almost every one of the funding rounds in the last few years. And part of that is because we put a lot of time and effort and funding into our deals to make sure that they're ready, shovel ready. The state doesn't want to fund a deal and then have to sit and wait for, the first shovel to hit the ground. So we are always working on our deals. We have a broad staff. We have folks, as Charlie mentioned, that really hone in on the passive house design. So that's something as a development, manager, he knows is being dealt with and trustful, and trusts the outcome. We right now we have some partners in many of our deals, and so the state does allow when it's 2 partners, 2 reliable partners, for one of them to put in the project and allow the other one some freedom to put in another project. So we have that currently. One other project that's in, I would call pre-development, is another project on the Cape in Orleans, but all the other projects we have on the Cape have been funded. So we're very fortunate. We're in a great spot. The project that Lisa is working on in the city in Boston is another one of our pipeline deals. That's somewhat unique. Again, we have a partner in that deal as well, so it may not count against our funding application, our number of funding applications. So I would say we're really in a great spot to advance this project and to move it forward. Obviously the 40B permit or the permitting is first and foremost something we have to get moving on. On all of our 40B projects, we have moved those very swiftly through the 40B process without leaving, with making sure the public was heard and everyone's voice was heard. But it's really critical to get that first step completed.
So I think also following up on that, so not only financing, but also just in terms of your team and the organization, what kind of capacity do you have to fit this in with everything else that you're doing?
Yeah, we have a lot of talented and committed staff. You know, Charlie just rolled off of the Kenzie, and he would be the lead on this project. He is supported
Yep.
at the you know, through other staff folks who are somewhat junior to Charlie, and so he's teaching them and bringing them up, and you know, we have. You know, we have work that we're doing in Chicago that's handled through the Chicago staff. We have work in DC that's handled through the DC staff. Charlie is in Boston, as well as a number of other project managers and development folks. And we do. Sometimes we bring staff from Chicago to work on a deal if we feel we need that added set of hands. I can let Jeremy and Lisa speak to their staffing.
Yeah, we're always busy, so that's great. You know, you figure it out. No, I will say one of the beautiful things about affordable housing is because there are these funding applications, you know what your deadline is. You know, what gets really hard in the private side is your deadlines are always moving. It's harder to predict what's going to happen. So one benefit here is we're already aware of when the next round would be and what we're working towards. So it gives us a level of predictability. And so we can work with the town, with other stakeholders to just all be on the same page. Like, okay, we've got 3 months left. We've got 2 months left. What are still our touch points? So I think I'm not concerned about us working it into our workflow. I mean, we've been around for 20 some years, and this is the kind of stuff we love working on, and we've always been able to jump in and tackle it. So we're in a comfortable place to be able to handle it.
We're fully staffed to take this on, and frankly, it's in my backyard, so it'd be a priority. It's one of those jobs you can't hide from. So no, it would fit really well within our current schedule.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any others? Bill, you're up.
So my question regards the land disposition agreement. So we imagine a scenario where the town will not agree to any of the comments that your team made for the land LDA. What kind of impact would that have on your project?
Well, that's a great question. And, you know, you're not the first town to tell us that. And I will say, you know, we have incredible attorneys, incredible folks who know the funding rounds, who know what that land disposition agreement, what flag it might set off, and how to accommodate either our funders, either our board, either our, you know, whomever that LDA is in front of. I will tell you that, you know, a lot of what is included in that LDA, you won't see the impact, our comments, you won't see why they impact the project until we're a little farther down the road. For instance, you know, we talk about the, you know, wanting potentially a lease versus a fee simple sale. Now that was done very specifically because there's a funding source called Housing Works or Mass Works, it was its former name, that really is intended to be used on publicly owned land. Now that resource could evolve and it could allow for something other than publicly owned land, but that is why that particular sort of comment was put into the LDA. Some of the other ones, you know, one of the other item that pops up is we know you want 100% affordable project. That's what our plan is, and we will deliver on that. What sometimes we need the LDA to point to is that if we had to pack up our bag and leave, and that's not going to happen, but if it did, the funding would need to rely on really a 40B project, which allows for some 80% and market rate units, right? So that's not what we're delivering, but long term, that's what that LDA has to suggest, that it is a 40B comprehensive permit. And when they appraise it, it's a 40B comprehensive permit. Our funding, the funding we bring to the table, is 100% affordable. It's our funding, it's the state funding, and that's what we're going to deliver. So there's a lot of nuances that, we provide comment because we're not doing this in a vacuum. We're doing this with transparency, with collaboration, with, information sharing. And, we also, it's not a dark line for us. We know that there are things that the town is just going to say, you've got to find a way to work around this, or you've got to find a way to accept this. And we'll get there. There's no doubt in my mind. And we have in other circumstances. We're just trying to lay out for you what we see is the most predictable and, pathway to getting this project started and completed.
So to follow up on that, I understand why you suggested the 99-year lease versus ownership for the MassWorks financing. Would your pro forma change in any way? Should it be ownership?
I think the only thing that would change is that funding source that we're relying on to do some of the infrastructure would have to be another funding source. And it may mean that those funds have to come from POA. If we've committed to, if we got down the road and you said, look, we thought the lease would work, it's not going to, right? We would have to find a way to plug that gap. And we've done it on other projects, not along the lease end of things, but if a town has said, look, we really want this, how can you make that happen? We'd go to the state and we'd say, the lease isn't the way the town wants to go. And so we're going to come in with an application for these funding sources because that MassWorks might not be available to us. The Housing Works, the new form of MassWorks, is new. This will be the first year. And so we have provided feedback to them and said, we feel it should be available to 100% affordable housing on town-owned land that we purchased because that's what the town wanted. So, we're still working on that, but for now, it would just mean we'd have to find another way to fund that gap.
Okay, thank you. Any other follow-ups?
Yeah, that's fine.
Great. Who's next?
I think that's
Linda.
So for this particular project, what kind of challenges do you see with this, and taking time to design it, to look at the development, the financing? What do you see as anything particularly challenging for this? In any wide open?
Yeah, no, that's great. I would say what really attracted us to this project, albeit a small project, was all the work you've done, right? And we know that the public process is critically important. We don't do our work without knowing that, and without recognizing the time and input that process needs. But I'll let Jeremy and Lisa speak to the site itself. I think when we take on a project like this, really our sense is where are we going to need to get the support from, right? Who's going to really challenge what we're trying to do here and how we're trying to do it. And then of course, the funding changes, right? We're predicting that there will be some advancements in the bond bill, and that the 4% tax credits are going to be a little more available, and therefore that's what we chose to use here. But we have a really strong connection to not only the policy around these funding sources, but the policy makers at the state. And they want to hear our stories. They want to hear why something works and why something doesn't work. So I would say that the market and the resource environment is constantly changing, and we just have to be responsive to that.
Yeah, I'd say probably the existing topography and the existing sort of conditions that are out there, the fact that it drops off pretty quickly off of the road there, we're gonna have to do, some work to make sure we can get in a way that's convenient and comfortable and reasonable. Even the fact that it all slopes down to the wetlands, we can't just have all of our stormwater runoff down into the wetlands. So we're gonna have to be creative about how we bring slopes back into the site so that we're probably capturing our stormwater in the middle of the site. We often like to put our stormwater on the edges of the site. So I think there's a lot of little nuances around the existing grades. The fact that it's existing woods, nobody likes taking down trees. You're going to have to take down some trees if you're going to build some housing here. So how can we maximize that tree save working with the existing grades to the degree we can? So, I mean, there's no easy sites left in New England. There's nowhere that's sort of flat and perfect and ready to go. So it's a challenge you solve almost anywhere. But this one in particular, the second you drive up to it, you're like looking kind of down into the site a little bit. You're like, oh, okay, that's something we're going to have to figure out. And we will, right? But I would say that's probably the thing that jumps out to me. I don't know if you have.
Yeah, no, I would agree. I think that the wetlands always make it very difficult in terms of new development around wetlands. So we would want to be very sensitive to, those boundaries, stormwater for sure, and the trees. Even just walking through there are a lot of trees that are, there's a lot of Norway maple in there. There's a lot of invasive things that could come out very easily. And what we would commit ourselves to is going in to see if there are other things that are valuable, that are actually positive trees that we might want to maintain, and could we work around, and even some of the site elements. I know there's like a stone wall there. We didn't talk about this, but during the charrette, as we were designing through it, it's like, well, it's not in such a great place, but it is an element that could be like repositioned and recreated, and so trying to maintain a lot of the character of the site. I think some of the other challenges are the intersection there, that it's a pretty fast intersection, like along Wall Street and at North. On the other hand, it's kind of a great location because you have an express that goes through there. You can think about commuter transportation potentially. And again, I think this idea of the trail system and are there ways that we can look at improving some of the conditions now?
Right. I have one follow-up, Julie. About the financing. Say the 4% credits are still really backed up, and as we move forward on this, would you be flexible in looking at other kinds of structures for financing?
Yes, absolutely.
Just to keep,
Charlie, how many times do you think we we recast our financing plan? Quite a lot, So if the 4%, if we either heard from the state, because we do a lot of talking with the state, or we decided, we have found another funding source, a passive house, energy rebate or something, then we can still make the 9% work. At the moment, they're both competitive, right? So it's not gonna, choosing one over the other doesn't necessarily mean it's gonna, delay the project. It just means we have to be responsive.
Yeah, I would just add that I think 100% of the deals that come out of the acquisitions department into the development department change from when it's handed off to when it is put into action and we actually implement it. We're constantly responding to evolving interest rate markets and tax credit markets. New sources become available. So I think we have a really great plan in front of us, but inevitably something is going to change and we're going to have to respond to it. And I think that is one of the things that POA is known for, is creatively responding to challenges and issues that come up. And that's what we do, and that's why we like what we do, and we look forward to potentially taking on the challenge here.
And I think it's an exciting time because the state recognizes there are challenges here. Local communities, the fact that you guys are even putting forth this land for this is exciting. 10 years ago, no one's thinking about this or working as hard, right? Or the state isn't putting in as much, right? So it's an ever-changing landscape, right? So it could very well be in a year's time, there's all these other funds available, like they're saying. So that they're constantly tracking these things. They're constantly promoting the kind of changes that are needed, which is really exciting. So,
Great. Thank you.
Okay. We have 4 more questions and a very short time.
Speed
5
round.
minutes.
So fast, right? That's right.
Here we go. Although they're all very important, so let's not skip over any details.
Okay.
Does your pre-development funding give you flexibility to respond to changes?
Absolutely.
Great.
We have.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I just did that. Absolutely. They're our own funds, right? So
Right.
we can decide where, with the support of our board, we can decide where those funds are best used.
Okay, thank you. Anything else? Tiffany?
Describe a project where you face a particular challenge and how did you respond?
Do you want to take this one? I can talk
Sure.
about
No,
Bourne a
I
little bit.
can. Bourne would be good. I was going to talk about Attleboro maybe a little bit.
Yeah, you could.
Um,
Attleboro was a development that we bought that was already existing.
we
so-
we lost a lot of sleep on that one. We had one of those last minute environmental issues that comes up. It delayed closing. We had to go in and figure out what was happening in this dirt that we bought and why it was discovered so late in the game. But ultimately, we were able to work with a highly competent environmental consultant, put together a plan. That deal is under construction right now. We expect it to be complete in spring of next year. And so we were able to effectively manage what could have been a real serious environmental issue and put a plan in place. And that's going to be 92 units of 100% Section 8 housing, beautifully redeveloped in spring of next year.
Yeah, I will say we pull in really experienced consultants when we need to. And that's at every level of the development process. Because, we don't always have the answers. We think we do. We have a really informed starting point, but we do bring in. I would say one of the 40Bs, the friendly 40Bs we did on the Cape in Bourne, became, there was voices from the public, not always the abutters, but some of the public that really wanted the building shape to be slightly different. They felt that it was too long and monolithic, and they really wanted a bend, right? They wanted to feel, and these were folks who, were professional developers, builders, designers, and so we accommodated that. We made a change and worked hard to make sure that change wasn't going to have a domino effect, and was able to get the 40B permit in place in very quickly, and now it's almost ready for folks to live there. It's about 3 months away.
Thank you. We're going to skip Mark for now. Bill?
So I'm going to preface this by saying I raised two young men who both played sports, and the only way our marriage survived is I did the laundry. So, so I'm very curious about your, the way the laundry is set up as kind of a go to the laundromat, which I would often do as well. But just so if you could talk a little bit about how you envision that working.
Sure. So, do you want me to take this one? Okay.
I can speak to the opportunity of it. You speak to the challenge.
I'll speak to the challenge. Not many of our properties, even our family properties, have in-unit laundry. And that's really for two major reasons. First and foremost, we find that the energy use skyrockets because, your son has to clean his uniform, and so he throws it in one time, dries it one time, It also, when washers and dryers break down, it can be catastrophic, right? An overflowing washer, drips down on the unit below, dragging a new appliance up the stairs can be, can be devastating to the unit itself. And so we've always felt that a community laundromat is also a place for folks to connect. It's a place for folks to say, oh, so-and-so does her laundry every Thursday. If I want to talk to her, I'm going to go down, on Thursday, or she didn't show up this Thursday, something wrong, knock on the door. So we have always felt that it really brought community together. And I know it's an extra step for, all these wonderful moms and dads to take their laundry down, but it's an energy efficiency standpoint, it's a community impact standpoint, and it's just something that we feel really strongly works in our properties. And do you want
nailed
to
it.
Okay. And we talked about it, but, many
Yeah.
times with Union Studio.
Okay, thank you. Did you have a? No. Okay, Mark.
This may be a short one too. We've asked you a bunch of written questions and you've given us a bunch of written responses. We just wanted to give you an opportunity if you want to elaborate on any of those answers that you've provided us. Is there some nuance that you thought you might want to emphasize?
I don't think so. We deliberated over those answers, and spent time, responding to them, and we thought they were really appropriate and really helped us to communicate back to you some of the things that might have, you might have had to read between the lines to get our answers on. So we think they're pretty comprehensive.
Okay. So, sorry, didn't mean to feel like we're rushing.
No,
Someone else has the
Everyone's
room.
You have a crucial role, so thank you. Yeah.
But is there anything else you'd like to say before we wrap up?
No, I think we're really excited for this opportunity. It really, we think the state would absolutely support this project. We all know and love Lexington. I had my first engineering job here in Lexington, so I know how unique and special Lexington can be, and we are really hoping that our starting point, our design, really starts being influenced by the community process and starts feeling better to folks. Anything else?
No, thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you all.
Great. So,
for your time.
again, thanks so much for all of your hard work that went into this. It's really given us a lot to think about. We do want to set up site visits this week, so I'll be in touch. It looks like a couple of us are coming to the Cape, so.
Great.
And.
It's the right time of year for it.
I know, it's my favorite time.
And on behalf of the Affordable Housing Trust, I want to thank you guys all for coming and attending our developer presentations and interviews. We all want the development of the first 100% affordable housing development on town-owned land to be a success, to be an example of what we can do as a town and be an example to others as well, so we can get more housing that is affordable, that's such an urgent need, into our community. And again, I'll repeat this again, you probably can memorize this by now, but if you have any comments, please email them to Affordable Housing Trust at lexingtonma.gov, and the Affordable Housing Trust will be considering them, discussing them on Monday, the 23rd. So you're welcome to come to our trust meeting, and we will consider them in making our recommendation to the select board. So with that, we need to adjourn the meeting. So may I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Second?
So Tiffany, are you?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Bill?
Yes.
Linda?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. So we are adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Nice to meet you.